Understood.
Top up. I think he's busy. Professor Asif, how many tanks did you get for yourself?
Oh, I'm using my legs to do the walking. I'm not.
Okay, that's
I'm
smart.
not using car.
You know, in Singapore we call it bus 11.
In Bhutan, they have pedestrian Tuesdays, right? So Professor Asif, I think you've just incorporated that into your everyday, which is excellent.
Yeah, I do about 15,000 steps a day.
Wow, that's incredible.
Professor
Top of the
Asif, are there
hour,
any
but let's
segways?
music.
Any what? Subways, did you say?
Segways. Segways, those motorized stand-up moving vehicles.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Those, they're all over the place. Yeah, I don't use them, though.
Oh,
Hey, Tyler.
Carter-san is
Cheryl.
in the audience. Hey, go ahead.
I just opened a leftover fortune cookie from my amazing Chinese dinner on Saturday night. So my fortune this morning, because I usually don't even look. Okay, this one is good. Be willing to believe in anything that is good. I like this fortune.
That's so good. Hey, Anna Marie, I read that Sawadi in Minneapolis, they've incorporated AI servers into the restaurants. Have you checked that out yet?
I saw that too, and I haven't been yet, but I will be going soon. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, you have to give us the word on the street.
Yeah.
Johan, your mic is hot. Not hot, but it's not muted. Thank you, Johan.
Was that someone's cat again?
That's
Chris,
the cat.
it's your cat
Chris
again.
cat?
Gosh darn it. Getting the kids milk and I forgot I was unmuted. Damn it.
Todd, was that you whistling? I heard someone whistling, and your mic is the only one up. So I'm just kind of.
It was Trader Joe's too. He's just so vocal in the morning. He's like a cat that just woke up.
Yeah, Todd's mic is on too. Okay, end of the song.
Okay, so here we are on Clubhouse. It's happy Monday, everybody. Hope you had a lovely weekend. I noticed the sun was shining in Stockholm. It was an unusually sunny weekend. And it's like one of the last days of sunny weather they're going to have for many months. So it was quite a comical scene. And nobody was missing an opportunity to get the last sunny day for the next many, many months. Who was that we were trying to bring up? He had his hand up. I invited him up.
Crayon?
Yes. I invited Crayon up, and then I saw he raised his hand, but I had already invited him, so it's kind of weird. Anyway, hopefully he's able to join. Okay, so we're going to do, as we have known, Carl. I invited Carl up, and we're going to go through the news, as we always do. I've got my list, and boy, there's some interesting ones. And then, oh boy, did Donish DM me a real humdinger of an article. But before we get into those, does anybody else have one that they want to get into? Make sure that we cover today.
Well, Tyler, there's breaking news like 2 hours ago, maybe 3, on the Today Show. It broke on the Today Show. One of the Facebook executives says they're going to pause the Instagram Kids project.
Yes, that's the top story of today. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri. Says Instagram's pausing work on Instagram Kids after criticism from parents, experts, regulators, policymakers, and others. Your dog walker, your babysitter, the massage therapist, and pretty much everybody's in agreement that Instagram Kids is a bad idea. So they're going to pause that genius concept. And in light of all of the news lately, interestingly, he took to Twitter himself to say, we're pausing Instagram Kids, although we believe building it is the right thing to do. Well, nobody else thinks that. So maybe pause on that one. Maybe give that one a little, run that one around the water cooler a few more laps. And maybe yeah. Who other than Instagram? Who thinks that's a good idea? Except for 13-year-old kids, I'm sure think it's a great idea. But yes,
I was thinking, what if they converted it to like in the U.S. we had the Scholastic bookmobile, right? So I mean, if they were to actually do something positive, productive, that would have really good tangible outcomes.
Look at you.
Yeah,
look at you, little Uncle G. You got that Uncle G influence. Little Marxism, maybe.
I was so excited when the Scholastic bookmobile would come to my school, and I would bring my little permission slip with all of the books.
I like it.
I mean, so can't they do something that's, kind of cool, but then, maybe
damn right they can, because TikTok's doing that in China. They're going to learn math.
Hey,
they're going to learn
history.
They're going to learn science.
Did somebody say math? Anybody got any of that math?
You guys, you want some algebra? I got some.
Oh, John Madison is here.
Black market math. Yes, say John. And I don't know where Crayon went. I invited him up though. Anyway, yes, it is what it is. I love that concept. And if they did do that, I think people would overwhelmingly support it. I wonder, and I think there's still a huge opportunity there within the hybrid of social media, some kind of hybrid of TikTok and learning. Because, I mean, the kids are going crazy for TikTok, are they not? Right? I mean, it's now surpassed YouTube and Facebook, right? So it's a bona fide global sensation. Now, they're doing a bunch of dances. They're doing all kinds of stuff, all kinds of content. But using the algorithm, using the technology, could that not potentially unlock the secret of the future of education for young folks? Right? Like the dance move involves, a song about A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And then, there's some kind of dance, and then the Pythagorean dance. You know what I mean?
Like those 70s cartoons about the Bills, right?
Oh, I think, yes, exactly. A little bit of
Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse Rock, Electric Company, Sesame Street.
Conjunction Junction.
Oh my goodness, yes. What's your function?
Yes. Yeah, I have a colleague. He's a nanotechnology professor, but he's Professor PPP, and he raps his lectures. This is a Thai guy. So, I mean, I think that, the possibilities are endless.
I'm just a Bill on Capitol Hill is the one Chris was talking about.
That's right.
And they can still see the photo of the Bill, the cartoonist Bill guy,
and the Simpsons always bring it up too, like as part of their ongoing. They'll just bring up the 70s Capitol Hill Bill songs.
But he always sounded so depressed, like
yes.
I'm just a Bill.
Yeah, well, I think
Conjunction have that hook though.
I know, but I think that Bill knew just how bureaucratic that whole system is. So he was not optimistic.
It was a political cartoon and a cartoon at the same time. So the adults cracked up that it was like, yeah, nice try. And the kids are like, what's this Bill thing all about?
So funny. So, yeah, but there's a unicorn hidden in there someplace. I'm quite confident of that. And I think that in part because parents are starting to wake up to the power of these apps and, how it's almost like creating healthy food that kids like, similar thing, but this is like what kids consume, how to make things palatable in a way that it's a net is good for them and not bad for them. So this is relevant to the next story. There's actually, it's a combination of three. That first one is that Adam, the boss of Instagram, is going to pause Instagram Kids after criticism from parents and everything else. And boy, they're getting a lot of coverage on that. Wall Street Journal, CNBC, The Verge, TechCrunch, Insider, CNN, USA Today, Instagram. The fact that everyone's covering that kind of is echoing the fact that that's probably a good idea. I think when USA Today and the Wall Street Journal and CNBC and at CNN, the New York Times, Bloomberg, I bet you, the Reuters, I bet if we opened all of these, not one of these would say, well, why should they pause it? Not one of them is going to take echo Instagram's CEO's point that they should do it. Not one. Is anyone willing to take that bet? Probably not. I think everyone is in agreement that's probably a bad idea. So interestingly, someone else who commented on Twitter is one Jeff Horwitz, who's the journalist at the Wall Street Journal, who's responsible for the article that revealed the point about Instagram that started kind of the meme that Instagram's bad for young ladies, and so he tweeted about the fact that Instagram's not releasing Instagram for Kids. He's more than anyone responsible for that, actually. So here is an interesting series of dominoes here. Jeff Horwitz has some kind of leaker insider at Facebook who shared a slide from a deck, which we're going to talk about more here in a second in a very interesting way. This conversation is going to take a really interesting turn in about 3 minutes. So hold that thought. But Jeff Horwitz from the Wall Street Journal, who wrote that article that revealed that internally Facebook knows and it has a slide which says that Instagram's bad for young girls and their body image. And that has led to senators asking Instagram and Facebook not to release Instagram for Kids. And now Facebook is saying, okay, we're not going to release Instagram for Kids. So, hey, Jeff, I guess there's a lot of folks who are probably happy to buy you around at the bar because more than anyone else, Jeff Horwitz is somewhat largely responsible for Facebook, the tipping of the domino that has led Facebook to decide to pause the release of Instagram for Kids, right? Now, Jeff is on Twitter and he says, critics of Instagram Kids will see this as a acknowledgement that the project is about, quote unquote, he tweets, quote unquote, critics of Instagram Kids will see this as an acknowledgement that the project is a bad idea. That's not the case. According to, he's quoting Adam, the boss at Instagram, in his tweet there. And he says, last week, I told Instagram we had something coming on this subject, which is the bomb they dropped on them, which has now led them to stop this. So the next bit is that Facebook itself, and it was like the VP of head of research named Pratiti Raychaudhuri, wrote a blog post on Facebook.com, FB.com, and the title is What Our Research Really Says About Teen Well-Being and Instagram. And this article is a rebuttal directly to the Wall Street Journal article about Facebook being bad for kids. And it's a quite well-written article with really solid points, including the slide, the quote-unquote slide, the smoking gun that was referred to by the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal says, we saw documents, a slide titled, and they said the title of the slide in the Wall Street Journal article, and the title of the slide is, we make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls. That's the name of the slide. But they didn't show that actual slide in the Wall Street Journal article. But they did say, the data on the slide clearly indicates that 1 in 3 teen girls, it makes body image issues worse for them. And so they wrote their article about that they say, hey, we saw documents inside from Facebook, and that document that we saw shows that they'd done a study, and in that study, 1 out of 3 teen girls says that Instagram makes them have a lower body image. Okay, now Facebook, the owner of Instagram, comes out now with their version of their blog post refuting the Wall Street Journal, and they show the actual slide. And there's a very important reason why they're showing the actual slide, because the rest of the slide, which I just tweeted just now to the Tech News Twitter account, so you can see it with your own eyeballs. It was the most recent tweet. The slide is actually about 12 things. And it asks which of these things have a positive impact, meaning they were asking people about different issues. For example, like family stress, financial stress, sadness, anxiety, loneliness, sleep issues, eating issues, social comparison, FOMO, fear of missing out, body image, and does Instagram make it worse or make it better? And it turns out this slide, right, that the Wall Street Journal wrote about, says that for example, family stress, Instagram makes things way, 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 way better for young girls. Way better. Then on the same slide, it's one chart. This is all about a single chart. And number two, financial stress makes things way better. Sadness makes things way better. Anxiety, loneliness, sleep issues makes things way better. Instagram helps in all of these areas. However, on body image, 33% say it makes it worse. So what the Wall Street Journal did was it ignored the 11 of the 12 where Instagram makes things better and focused on the fact, although it's true, statistically true, that 1 in 3 makes it worse. Yeah, but that was the 1 out of the 12 on these other issues that they measured on. It made things better. And that's why Facebook is like, hold the fucking phone, Tyrone, because the essence of that slide is essentially a strong positive for Instagram, and you've turned it into a negative because you're intentionally trying to assassinate us by cherry picking data. So
yeah, but if the news media suddenly provided, a proper, balanced depth and analysis, right, nobody would read them anymore.
Andy.
I think where Facebook went wrong is they didn't do what Apple would have done with that data. If Apple had a statistic that said 2/3 of their female users were actually gaining benefit, there wouldn't have been anything to pick apart. I'm not saying that.
Also, if they had done it a little more expeditiously, like, in the same day, because what has happened is since the Wall Street Journal wrote that article, it created a mental meme that Instagram's bad for girls, and everyone kind of saw that headline. Facebook didn't dispute it expeditiously at the moment, which people assumed means that they accepted it as fact, and they didn't dispute it. Okay, that's the new reality. Instagram's bad for kids. We all believe that now.
We believed that social media was bad for body image before, right? That was an existing prior assumption that nobody really cared to refute.
Right.
Question.
Yeah, that's another great point. Hold 1 second, Maurice. You bring up a great point, Andy, which is that particular point seemed to it's kind of confirmation bias. We kind of assumed that already, so it was an easy sell, and more importantly, it got what's the word I'm looking for? It somehow it transmorphed from the very specific issue of body image, but it helps with family stress. It helps with financial stress and sadness and anxiety and loneliness and sleep and whatnot. And so it just somehow went from the body image issue into it's bad for young women, period. No. It's great for young women as it relates to family stress and financial stress and sadness and anxiety and loneliness and sleep and eating issues. It happens to be bad about body image. And that's a very different thing than to say it's bad for young women. And somehow, how the nature of the telephone game as it applies to the media is, it starts out on a very specific point. The study says 1 in 3 teen girls' body image, and somehow that transmorphs into, Instagram's bad for young women, period.
Well, it's the same thing that, it's why we have to get rid of cash, because it's used by drug dealers and money launderers.
Or Bitcoin, even more. It suffers from that more than anything.
No, I'm deliberately choosing cash because, right, the easy shot to take is cryptocurrency, because not as many people understand it, right? But it's actually not nearly the vehicle of choice as is just, plain old ordinary cash, right? But nobody's going to get wound up about the cash headline.
There's a fundamental difference.
Too quickly.
Just quickly, and then I'll shush. There's a fundamental difference, though, with your analogy, Andy, is that the drug runners that might be potentially using cash aren't controlling the narrative. They're not the one doing the research and publishing the research.
Good point, John.
Two quick things. Yeah, surveys that and analytics that sort of lead to these 12 conclusions are themselves fraught with hazards. So while we're looking at the 12 points, we should be cautious about accepting the findings at face value.
Sure.
And the second point is we can expect that internal documents will be increasingly targeting external audiences from this point forward.
Say the second point again.
That internal documents like this one that was leaked will increasingly be targeted at external audiences, aka Wall Street Journal.
You cynical son of a bitch, John. Oh my goodness! Did a bunch of our stuff leak again? Oh no!
And it's absolutely the most maddening thing of working in a tech company is you pretty much have to assume that everything that you say in an email is going to appear in a newspaper, and you've got to be super fucking careful about anything that could ever be by anyone, right? Any provocation, right, that you might use to make a point, right? You've also got to at the same time think, okay, what happens if this splashes on the front page news? Is this the end of my job?
Right, but I think I love John's point, which is we're now going to see journalistic honeypots on USB keys in the parking lot at the Wall Street Journal of treasure troves of positive data, PDFs, top secret, confidential, and it's just going to be a whole bunch of positive data.
Well, more to that point, did they release the actual data? As in, we've had the slides, so we had apparently sort of cropped slides, selective information from the Wall Street Journal, and then we've had a response from Facebook. So the cynics in me saying, well, we don't actually know whether the response that fucked up, whatever. So my real question is there the data? Like, how? It doesn't even matter if they had a series of slides which showed categorically that Facebook is bad or categorically that Facebook is good. The question is, how are they running their data? Like, how are they collecting it? Where is the raw data that other people can peer review and go through? Because otherwise this is nothing but an attempt at pro PR from Facebook and con PR from Wall Street Journal, and then the public's going to get stuck in the middle trying to figure out what exactly is going on. So, like, have they released the full data? And that's really what needs to happen here, because otherwise we can't trust anything that I'm...
And I think the bigger issue is, so they have this data that it affects negative body image. What's the plan? And I think if they come up with a plan that is practical, rational, and targets that finding, they should be absolutely applauded for it.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Did Jeff Horwitz receive all the slides or just this negative slide?
Good question.
Do we know?
We have to go back and read that article.
Yes,
to get the essence of that. Yeah, and
if you just received the negative one, then obviously there was
no. But even the singular slide itself, what he did was, and I tweeted it out. If you look at it, it's a chart, and it shows.
It's a cherry pick.
Yeah, it's one. It is one slide in a deck, obviously, and there's 12 data points about family stress, financial stress, sleeplessness, anxiety, loneliness, blah, 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 blah. And it says, does Instagram make it better or worse or no impact? And then on essentially most of them, Instagram has it helps. But in the one where it doesn't help, it's body image. And it does a breakout. It's two different data charts, one for boys, one for girls. On boys, it doesn't really have, it's all good, actually. It doesn't even hurt on body image. It even helps on body image. But for girls, it doesn't. So they took the one data point out of 24 on this one slide, out of these two different charts. It's on, but so he maybe only saw this one page of this PDF. Maybe he saw the whole PDF. And then in which case he really cherry picked out of a whole deck, one data point on one slide that they themselves put in the title of the slide, kind of drawing out the point that they understand the issue. And yeah, to whoever was speaking before you's credit, John or Carl, that if Facebook were to somehow make some kind of announcement as to how they're going to address that in a proactive way, I think that would score a lot of social political points with folks.
I've seen a lot of these programs get created in tech companies, and they end up being so superficial and knee-jerk, and nobody really invests the time to understand the underlying mechanism. What you really want is to have proper academic study that really gets into the root causes, and then look at, all right, how do you change the journey that gets you there, right? And that's not something that tech company, we have this image. In fact, this is where tech companies get punished for things that are, underlying sociological issues that we haven't resolved, right, fundamentally. And so we blame the tech company because they make them visible to us. And the tech company, by making the tech company powerful, right, giving them a level of power that frankly they haven't earned, and making them the bad guy. It reminds me of what Americans did recently with Putin in Russia, right? Russians don't see Putin as the evil genius that Americans see. And the same thing is happening with social media, right? It's that the tech companies, we've created this illusion that the tech companies are these evil geniuses, and in reality they're just dealing with the same social issues that we're dealing with. They've got only slightly more clue than we do, because they're seeing data points that aren't visible to the rest of us. But these are unresolved sociological issues in general.
What I would add to that, Andy, is that there is a line, I think. I mean, I agree with what you've said, but there is a line between making something apparent or visible and exploiting it. And I think for me, it comes down to,
Totally.
how far do companies go? Because to your point, they have access to the data. So they know that things like filters or the algorithms in terms of which stories you see and who's most popular, who's most fabulous. I mean, they know how to manipulate that, or maybe manipulate is a loaded word, but they
Well,
know
there's
how to
this thing that's
demonstrate that.
happening in
And
tech,
so,
right? And
so
I
there's
think
a matter of there, I think that for me is the fundamental issue. It's to what extent are these sociological issues being exploited via technology, as opposed to just saying, hey, we have these tools, and yeah, we have a lot of problems in society that we still need to figure out, particularly as it relates to kids and self-esteem and all of these other things. But this is just a tool, as opposed to, if we figure out how to get more clicks, we make X amount more, in terms of profit. So let's do more of that.
you're hitting on such an important issue here, and I want to emphasize that even the tech companies themselves didn't understand until they were knee deep into it that what they were doing is effectively, farming and harvesting human attention and engagement, right? And the companies that have made lots of money were the ones that began to build business models around them, right? And the ones who didn't, like Yahoo, that only survived because they made some good investments in China, right? Still, nobody has really come to terms with that reality. Nobody's, even the
Indeed.
engineers that work in these places, they're still trying to live the identity loop that they were sold when they got the job. That I am making the world's information accessible, right? No one at Google wants to think of themselves as, I'm making it possible to harvest human attention and engagement. This identity loop, even within the tech industry, is excruciatingly problematic for everybody involved, and nobody knows what to do about it, right? They created the machine, but they don't really know what to do now.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned earlier, someone else did, in terms of, how this notion of power comes into play as well. So for the people that are consciously, exploiting these vulnerabilities, I liken it to like the techie kids in school who had the keys to the AV equipment and they knew more than the teachers and they were a bit drunken with power. And I think we just really need to be mindful in terms of, how much power executives and certain folks within tech companies have societally, and maybe that's where the governments are, particularly as we see how the US government and others are clamping down on big tech. I mean, I see all of this as being related.
One of the things that when the newspaper came out, one of the quotes that came out from the anonymous source was that we created a machine and now we don't know how to control that machine. That was like sort of what the whole thing is all about. And I think one of the challenges for Facebook is it just kind of confirmed how people were feeling before. And that's why that drip and drip and drip that have been confirmed from insider has been coming out, and why they had a resignation. So it's not like they can rebut one after the other, but it's just that it has been happening and some insiders knew about it, and now they are really trying to, explain it away. I think that's the bigger picture problem that they have.
Well, you mix this with the press and government, right? And the press is in a place where they've never been, right? They thought they had a birthright to human attention and engagement, right? And it turns out they don't, right? So they're desperate for human attention and engagement. So they're willing to push the boundaries that in the past they never would have pushed, because they pretty much counted on human attention and engagement. They didn't have a business model to worry about. Now they do, right? And then you've got government who just assumed that that power would always be theirs to control, and now they see these multinationals with power that they don't have, right? So you get this all into the mix, and it makes for really explosive combinations.
I don't think the press is worried. I mean, some of the press is overall, but the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are doing very well on their own. The New York Times depends on its subscription model, so and
Yeah, they're
the
the
Wall Street.
exceptions that prove the rule, right? How many of us are willing to go beyond a few paid subscriptions, right? This is the thing. It's an industry that thrived on advertising, right? And now those advertising dollars are disappearing, and subscription models are great if you are the top quality producers, right? You mentioned really the top two globally, right? But how many of the press and media properties can shift to that model successfully? That's a huge question, and it doesn't seem to me like most of us are willing to pay the amount of money directly that it would take to support that.
I guess in America it won't, because in the UK we have a thing called the British Broadcasting Corporation, and we all pay for it and we get it for free.
Yes, there'll be alternative models. There's ProPublica, which is a nonprofit, and it has it's going to be a consolidation and a rearrangement. But I don't think we should attribute a business motive to them going after negative news, because the news media always does. As the old saying goes, it's like 100 planes are going to land and they don't crash. The media is not going to cover those 100 planes that land safely. It's going to cover the one that crashes. And so that's the bottom line. You always have to be careful. I've worked on both sides I've worked in government, I've worked in with technology companies, I've worked in the media, and this is, you just have to always be very careful. And the bottom line is that in this blog post that Instagram posted, it admits it was never meant for younger kids, but for tweens age 10 to 12. So they should have called it Tween Instagram instead of Kids Instagram, or I don't know how it got its name. But anyway, I think they're backtracking, and I think, yeah, what people are saying is right. Both the power within the media, the tech companies was unknown even to them, and they're discovering it. But remember, they like to move fast and break things, and some of the things that they're breaking are potentially kids. We don't know that. Let's look at the data, but we should be careful. And the other thing is that the power, their real power, is to amplify things. Now, the printing press did that. The printing press amplified and gave the opportunity for transformation, most famously in the Protestant Reformation. So the level of power is just on another scale. We have to just get used to the fact and understand the fact that it's just amplified in a way that we never have encountered before.
If it bleeds, it leads, right? That's one of the
That's right. I
sayings.
was about to say, if it bleeds, it leads. It's always been the
Exactly.
case. Yeah.
But I also think it would be interesting to know what questions Facebook didn't ask. I mean, these are the 12 questions they did ask, but maybe they had a whole lot of things. Oh, we don't know. We don't want to know about that. We don't want to know about that. And
Hi,
also,
can I?
yeah, also no,
Oh,
one
sorry.
minute. I mean, we have to be to say that not all of these questions have the same weight. I mean, just because there's a way more positive doesn't mean that the negative one doesn't weigh more.
Right.
So we also have to take that into consideration. So just my few cents. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, on that note, hi, sorry, my name's Bria. I am a mental health professional and I see children, adolescents, and adults, and social media comes up a lot in many of the sessions. So I would say whenever we're looking at data coming out of the groups, the social media groups, it's important to understand what was the demographics and the socioeconomic status and the resources of the children, adolescents, or adults using the platform. And maybe looking at the trends of what they're engaging in to see whether it was information that would in fact boost body image or lower it. Obviously, there's huge variability in what's out there. I would also say I believe social media has really, highlighted the access to mental health as a problem in the United States, being an issue for pretty much all minors, children, and adolescents. What I often see is it's the last place that children and adolescents go for help with body image issues or family issues when there's not something easily accessible in their realm, right? Nothing in the family dynamic group, nothing at the school that's helping them. And so then they'll tend to go to social media to try to understand what's happening in their world. The other thing I would ask when I'm looking at data like that is, what is the person's understanding? Like, how are you even defining what a body issue is or what a family issue is? And then what does it mean to not have an issue and to have an issue? Because you have to remember that children are not little adults. They understand the world from a very different lens, from, depending on where they are in their developmental stage. So those would be my questions when looking at the data, is how are you even defining this? What is the age of the children participating in a survey like that? And how is that being measured as good or bad? I'm done.
I just had a weird thought. Do not many young magazines for targeting young women have a similar effect in causing young women to have a negative self-image, body self-image?
Yeah, I gotta bring this. I gotta take real quick talk. Like, there's a researcher called Eric Stice at Stanford who has been doing work on this for a long time, and exactly what you just said, Tyler. I mean, this problem has been there forever, and forever. I mean, for a while, and it's actually very treatable by there's already a lot of work being done, and I think the depression part is more interesting to me. Anorexia is something that it doesn't hit that much, that many young women, but the depression part, I think, that's a bigger question. And we know what to do with the anorexia part from, if you just read Eric Rice's research, Stice's research, it's really 4 different, and of course, let's see, what was her name? Bria. You can probably add to this, but it's just really 4 sessions, and you can help these individuals move forward. There are a lot of nonprofits doing already this work, and I think it was Dove, the soap company, who has funded a lot of this already from their foundation. But the depression part, I think that's the open question. And what I've seen is, talking to some other researchers around this, they were saying that it's actually not necessarily social media just kind of amplifies it, like someone said, but there's underlying issues that are root causes that are bigger when it comes to depression. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents.
A couple other
I think the
little.
question.
Yeah, go
Hi,
ahead.
this is Iram. Yeah, I would second that. These issues start in very early childhood life, even before the verbal stages of human development, and are based in adverse childhood experiences, perceived or actual, real emotional, well-being issues when the childhood needs are not met growing up. So, yes, these problems are rooted in very early childhood developmental growing and emotional experiences. So, anything later on, surrounding environment, stressors, they just help to bring these issues forward and maybe make the experience harder, but they are not the initiating point.
Mm-hmm.
I think the point around magazines is an interesting one. I believe the statistic is we consume 7 times as much content as we did pre-internet in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wonder about the effect of the repetitiveness of being inundated with those sorts of images.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
then,
for us, though, sorry, Carl, it used to happen in the checkout line at the grocery store. That's where you
right,
got your kind of low quality information. Now it's everywhere. And I'll shut up.
right. And then, I mean, there's the dynamic of the Wall Street Journal versus the Facebook in a battle in the press, which that's not a position you want to be in, because Facebook isn't able to respond fast enough, and they're going to get hurt. And you've got this dynamic now of disgruntled. I would wager that could we create like some kind of prediction betting system, like a football pool, as we call them in the U.S., where we can predict the individual who's the leaker of this information based on the information that's been leaked. I'm going to bet that the person's quite young. That like demographically, like this is an interesting phenomena that's starting to happen at not just Facebook. Apple's dealing with the same issue, and it would happen to be our friend Ashley Gjovic over there, who's running a similar kind of scenario over in Apple land that Facebook is having with this internal leaker with Wall Street Journal. And I imagine this is going to become an epidemic with Google's going to have an internal leaker. Google had a bit of a interesting issue with internal folks.
Oh yeah, I went through that whole period where it used to be that anyone at Google could find out about any other program at Google and see slides and understand what was going on and ask questions, and everything was fine. Right as I was leaving, it basically became more like any other large company, compartmentalized. You could get fired for looking at things that you weren't involved in. It's not the same place at all that it.
Yeah, it's it has something to do with the it's just too much risk on Wall Street. Like somebody can do a lot of damage internally if they turn dark. Anyway, the person says they're going to reveal themselves, so we will soon know the answer as to who the leaker is. I assume as soon as they sell the movie rights and the book deal, that's when we'll know who the leaker is. But moving on.
If these companies do the right thing, they have nothing to worry, right? Do the right thing, then you have nothing else to worry about.
If everybody agrees
What's
on
the
what
right
that
thing?
is, sure.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the tricky part. I mean, that's why someone was talking about this. I don't think they weren't that. It's still an open question. What is the right thing? I mean, if you create a TV program and it's creating, you know, and then you have this crazy person that he does something and he said, well, it's because I watched this. What then?
Yeah, people always talk about the right thing when it's entirely subjective when it comes down to like who is asking about it. So yeah, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't most of the time.
There was one other interesting point in there somewhere. We'll circle back to it. It comes up again later. So the next article is...
Tyler, one last thing about that. Andy brought up the issue of superficial treatment of problems for broadcasting rather than going deep academically, understanding the problem and solving it. And there's been a series of articles in the last couple of months about greenwashing, about how companies are pretending that they're addressing climate change, but in fact, on deeper look, it was all intended for PR and really didn't have any real impact. So I would just hope that Facebook understands the gravity of this issue, because it's not that hard, frankly, to imagine ways to highlight kids that are doing cool stuff that don't look anorexic, and to promote, mesomorphic, normal-looking kids who are not phototouched and anorexic appearing, that could address some of these issues. So I don't think it should be that elusive or mysterious about how to counteract some of this negative body image stuff, which really is, pre-existing Facebook, but amplified clearly.
But can I just one final point, and I'll shut up, is the amplification issue. You have to take into account that quantity shifts eventually into a quality of a different phenomenon. So yes, we had the problem before with these magazines and the fashion industry, but now there are two things. You get the quantity becoming a different type of quality. And the other thing is there's a feedback loop. The person who's looking at these Instagram pictures, the young girl or the kids, are also taking pictures of themselves. They're also on the cover of those magazines in a sense. And that's what makes it really different.
Okay.
And Tyler, you postulated that it might be someone young. What if it's a parent? I have a parent, Tom Morehead, who's sometimes in the audience. He's DMing me about the struggles he's having with his daughter, and so I'm curious. Maybe there's a parent in Facebook that's just like enough is enough.
I'll wager.
I agree.
I'm happy to wager if anyone
Yeah,
would
but
like
also,
a very
Tyler, the author's been
friendly
interviewed.
little wager.
He said it's not. He said it's multiple sources. It's not one young source, but they might be young, but it's not one. It's multiple.
Yeah, after the first few files came out, he now says, I'm now getting a lot of new people reaching out to him. Yeah, but I believe that this one and the series of files, like the first 3 or 4, were around one person, and now he says a whole bunch of people are reaching out. So,
Tyler, may I suggest a resource for parents?
Yeah, but that's a little off topic, because we're not doing a deep dive today on child image, body image stuff. We're
just a book and work of Gabor Mate.
Mm-hmm.
His book and childhood experiences and the body images and the lack of connection at the basis of all these issues. So anyone who's looking, Gabor Mate and his books.
Okay. So the second biggest story of the day is from Nikkei Japan. It says Apple's suppliers like Isan Precision Engineering, Unimicron Technology, and Concraft Holding halt production until Friday as China tightens its energy policy. And this is becoming quite a big story that big parts of China and their industry have been shut down for many days. Some they're saying till the end of the month, due to lack of energy. China's crackdown on energy consumption comes from a combination of reasons: surging coal and natural gas prices, as well as Beijing's effort to cut emissions and increase in energy demands and is impacting a wider range of industries. It comes at a time when global markets have been shaken by the debt crisis engulfing China's Evergrande Group, one of the country's leading property developers. And then it mentions how many of the iPhone's parts, like their circuit board printer, which is Unimicron technology, the speaker component supplier called Concraft, the assembler called Pegatron, they're all shut down for the iPhone 13. And that's just the notable, but basically all of China's in this big factories in southern China where a lot of this stuff happens is shut down. This reaches way beyond the iPhone, but it's the one. I think they're writing the story about the iPhone maker because then that actually will get Americans to click and pay attention. Never mind that your hair dryer manufacturer isn't going to be able to make anything. It's your it's your iPhone 13 that you're anxious about. So that's what they're focusing on in this story. But it goes on to say the industrial electricity supply suspension comes amid Beijing's recent intensifying targeting of provinces, including a dozen provinces you've never heard of, and unless you've lived in China, and then even ones that you have, like Guangdong, which is huge, which is where Guangzhou is, which is where the bay where Hong Kong and Macau and Shenzhen and Guangzhou are all based there. It's it's an absolute industrial hub of China. It's shut down, y'all. And if not, and by the way, there's a separate article, and it's due to rising coal prices primarily. There's a separate article that it's gone way beyond the industrial companies are being told they have to shut down for several days. It's going into a BB sent in the directly related article here from Bloomberg. The headline says, China's power crisis moves from factory floor to homes. Shortage of coal and gas now affecting residential life. Guangdong, the Guangzhou, where Guangzhou is, the whole region, which is massive. I mean, this is like New England of China, or Southern California of China. It's like this massive area. People turn out the lights, use less aircon. China's energy crisis is beginning to hit people where they live, adding the risk of social instability. Those are very important words in China. The CCP, those are the CCP's, that's worst nightmare, social instability. And adding the risk of social instability to an economic slowdown and global supply chain disruptions. Now, Bloomberg, who wrote this, Dan Murtaugh. Dan, you must know that it is illegal to write articles that have a negative kind of take on the economy of China at the moment. You must know that people are being arrested and being held in prison for simply reading articles that cast a negative light on China's economy, Bloomberg. This is rather irresponsible of you to be writing articles that cast a negative light on China's economy. You're going to be sending people to jail for reading this. You best be careful. We read those headlines from the Financial Times last week. That people who have this app that they are required to install on their phones, but only if they want to go to the hospital or rent a house or, do any kind of normal kind of life type activities in China, they're forced to install an app now that they're told is going to protect them against scams. Turns out the app is just monitoring all of their phone. It's a Trojan horse onto their phone. And then as soon as people have noticed that the police show up at their house to arrest them, and when they do arrive, their first question is, why were you reading these articles that are negative about these lies about our economy from Bloomberg and the Financial Times? So I hope nobody's reading these articles in Bloomberg about, the whole Guangzhou region shutting down due to the lack of power.
And Tyler, this is because in China, there's a lot of social interaction, right? Where they get together and they just shoot the shit, so to speak, right? And that's the fear, is that someone reading Bloomberg will just start talking about this and it's just going to get out.
Hold on, can I point out something obvious? They're being asked to turn their lights off, so they already know there's an issue.
Yeah, well, no, I think they're being told that this is, obviously not a signal that the CCP is incompetent. It must be they have some kind of interesting twist to deflect the obvious reality.
Well, the CCP incompetent? I mean, the CCP has a policy basically to reduce carbon.
Right.
So they have to take coal out of
Right.
their
We're going to do our
generating
part.
capacity.
Yes.
So to balance that, they'd need to bring on board, an extra 150 gigawatts
Yeah.
worth of renewable power or clean power from nuclear. They don't have that. They have maybe on an annual basis 45, 50 gigawatts being brought online from wind, solar, and nuclear.
And I just wonder whether this will be enough of an impetus to create consumer behavioral change. I mean, because as people, as societies, as governments, as companies, we change for one of two reasons: either proactively, so the people that are saying we've got to do something about the climate, we've got to do something about conserving our natural resources or energy, and those people are able to garner some attention that leads to some change. But if you have, a region within a country that is as potentially influential as it is, it could be an opportunity for people and for companies to make different types of products and services that could lead to longer, more sustained behavioral changes.
Let's do the interesting article, Tyler.
Yes.
Anna-Marie's article.
Anna-Marie, let's do the one you just sent in from Science.
Very interesting.
Yes. It says sequencing every newborn's genome to detect diseases faces ethical and practical obstacles, but the UK is pushing ahead with a major test.
Maybe she's not there.
Did she
She's getting ready for a Zoom meeting, yeah.
Yeah. Anna-Marie?
Nah, she's not there.
That's okay. We'll circle back. Hopefully she can help us fill this one in. She says this story in Science from a few days ago includes many of the research and implementation questions we will be addressing. All but one of the experts in the article are colleagues and will be in today's workshop that she's might be jumping into right now.
Yeah.
It's pretty revolutionary stuff if newborn genetic screening does indeed become a population health standard. So I will tweet it out. I guess we'll wait for her to join us because she knows all the people in the article. Speaking of an article where that's about people we know, Danish sent in. Is Danish with us? Dr. Danish?
No.
We got to ping him.
He's so busy.
Well, he's in an article right now that just broke on Vice.
Oh, DM me too. I'm going to attach it to his session.
He sent it to you. It says Vice says doctors are being forced off Clubhouse by anti-vax harassment. Vice World News speaks to doctors who have given up trying to fight what they see as a tide of anti-vax hostility and misinformation on Clubhouse. And I'm going to tweet it out right now so you can see it with your own beautiful eyes. And it says, and it tells the story of a doctor who was, Anna-Marie's coming back.
It's multiple doctors, including Dr. Danish.
Exactly right.
Not just,
Yes.
And Maria, are you back? No.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay, great.
I had to walk away for a second.
Okay. So we were just bringing up the article from Science about the the genome testing of kids.
Yeah. So, this is a big deal within the context of public health programming. So we're already in the United States doing a fair amount of whole genome sequencing of babies that have symptomatic or critical illness. So babies that are already in the NICU, but we can't quite figure out what's wrong with them. And that actually wasn't standard of care even just a few years ago. So that's been quite a relatively rapid uptake because the data is really strong that it works and the benefits outweigh the harms. But if you can imagine adding a whole genome sequencing to what is the current sort of little blood spot heel prick screening that we do on babies now, there are huge implications for that, not the least of which is cost of doing that on every baby, but also just the complications of having a clear understanding of what the data, what those answers look like. And a lot of the things you'll be able to pick up with looking at the whole genome, of course, would be things that aren't necessarily going to manifest for babies or even children. These are things that'll pop up that we may want to keep an eye out for as we go into adulthood. And how do we kind of, manage that from a clinical perspective and a public health perspective for these kids as they're aging? And there's a lot of just unknowns. Quite so. The UK program is at least about 5 years ahead of where we're at in the United States, and they're looking at this from a population health standpoint. They've already been using whole genome sequencing in the UK, and this kind of new batch of data is going to be pretty critically looked at. By critically, I don't mean that we're all going to be downers and not accept the data that's coming out of it. Just looking at it from a critical eye to say, how is this feasible in the United States and eventually in the rest of the world? If you can imagine a time when the cost of doing such a test that could be just done through either saliva or the blood spot, if that comes down to a few dollars or less per child, then you start evaluating what the scientific benefit is of early diagnosis and earlier care.
Anna Marie, can I ask you, in the UK we're doing it because NHS healthcare is free. There's no insurance implication. What if you do it in the States? The implications will be that those people in payers and insurance companies will know who is going to be susceptible to disease X or Y when in their adulthood. That's one thing. But the advantage is for the pharmaceutical companies, because we could predict who will be more effectively useful for treatment. So targeted therapeutics will enhance. So it's a balance in ethics that will need to be debated in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And I these are the sorts of questions that are going to be coming up in this workshop that I'm going to be on most of today. And apologies if I'm going to have to bounce out here in a minute, but that is really the sorts of things that we're tackling. Is what does this mean for reimbursement, not just for the test itself, but for the implications of what we find from the test, and the payer systems around the world are different. Right, like who pays out of pocket, who pays, or what combination thereof if a payer's partially responsible for the costs associated. So yeah, medical ethics is a huge piece of this, and it's touched on at least a high level in this article that's talking about the UK experience and sort of extrapolating what that might look like in the rest of the world. But more to come, and I just these sorts of real public health driven questions, I think that are going to affect all of us down the road, and all of our children are really critically important. So I'm glad there's so many smart people, thoughtful people that are on the early stage of diagnostics that are participating and can really help us along this road.
Yeah, Anna Marie, this is John. Thank you so much for bringing this up. I know a lot of the folks in the UK who are leading these projects, and they're really highly ethical people who really want to pay attention to it. But a couple of quick things. The first known that is going to emerge out of this is that the number of misidentified fathers when they did genetic identification of victims of 9/11, victims of Katrina, was in the range of 10 to 20%. So the social implications of near immediate reveals of who the actual father was as opposed to the presumed father is going to be one of the societal consequences that will splash down pretty soon. The second thing is, as you know, the value of genomic data is very, very restricted until you match it to the phenotype and understand the connection between the genotype and the phenotype. Because there's so many multi-factor genetic inheritances that a single finding doesn't necessarily drive a particular phenotypic outcome. And once you do that linkage between genotype and phenotype, the ability to anonymize or maintain the privacy of the individual is gone, which brings us to what Nicholas has argued for many times on the stage around self-sovereign identity. And in combination with tools like homomorphic encryption or multi-party authentication. There are technical solutions that could indeed help prevent the adverse consequences of these data sets being re-identified to individuals in ways that could pose harm to the individual. There are technologies that can address that, and hopefully the folks in the UK are pursuing those in parallel with this project, because it can be done. The question is, will it be done, and will it be maintained effectively?
Yeah, all good points. It's not an all or nothing, right? As we ease into this, there's no universe where it's just to be like whole genome sequencing. Boom, every bit of data that comes out of that that process is going to be immediately just filtered over into a patient's electronic health record, provided to payers. I mean, it's a piecemeal approach that has to have all of the privacy and security considerations baked in, and then figuring out how that even remotely deployable in lower resource settings around the world is of course a completely another tier of implementation that we'd all have to work through. But it'd be really nice to do a deep dive on this, and I know Heyman and I have talked about it before in the health tech room. So maybe we can try to schedule for that so we don't derail all the important news that's coming out of this room today. But thanks for letting me share, and I'd be happy to do a quick report back after today's workshop.
Awesome.
I'd love to hear it. So
yep.
First of all, I love this exchange.
Yep, I'm looking forward to that. And please do when you if we're when do you think that would be, or how long you'll be out for?
So today, it's running from right now until 4 p.m. Eastern. So, yeah. But
we might not be here.
4 hours.
That's right.
No, you won't. You won't be.
Yeah.
You won't be for sure. And actually, the last panel of the day is our. The last two are one is the ethics. Bioethics panel, and then the next one is the policy panel that I'm also moderating. So anyway, yeah, but for tomorrow or another day, like when it works out, it'd be fun to report back. So anyway,
tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
Alrighty, thank you. The next one we were getting into was the doctors being forced off Clubhouse by anti-vax harassment. Vice World News speaks to doctors who have given up trying to fight what they see as a tide of anti-vax hostility and misinformation on Clubhouse. And it starts with the story of Dr. Siab Panwar was trying to do something nice. It was June, and thousands of Dr. Fauci emails about the early days of the coronavirus pandemic had just been released. Panwar thought that a Clubhouse room with doctors talking through the details could be useful. That is, until he saw another room emerge. There was another room made mocking us, with people changing their profile pictures to ours and putting the Chinese flag in the background, said the cardiology fellow who had been involved in research on COVID-19's impact on the cardiovascular system. Hostility, threats, and trolling are now what he and his colleagues expect if they attempt to share health information on the audio-only app. Right now, there is a room going on about how expectant moms should not get the vaccine, he told Vice World News. 200 people at this moment. It's been active for hours. Probably thousands of people have passed through this room. Panwar is part of a group of doctors who have tried their best to counter misinformation on Clubhouse, which has about 2 million weekly active users. Many were excited when Clubhouse first came on the scene. Emergency physician Dr. Rocky Jedek in Utah created a club with other doctors called the Evidence Base to provide, as the name suggests, an evidence-based approach to answering difficult questions. But soon he realized that Clubhouse rooms were spiraling out of control. He recalled the controversial evolutionary biologist Brett Weinstein one day telling almost 1,500 listeners that ivermectin was 100% effective as COVID prophylaxis, and that health agencies restricting access to this medicine were killing millions. Weinstein and his 59,000 followers on the app. Now, many of the doctors are fed up. Most of us have decreased our time on Clubhouse, said Dr. Danish from St. Louis, especially in COVID rooms, because anti-vaxxers are actively disruptive on stage. I've reported account after account with zero feedback or actions taken from Clubhouse. Clubhouse faces a challenging misinformation problem. The content is synchronous real-time, and tools that moderate live audio lag behind those which monitor text and images. Clubhouse deletes its recordings of live sessions if there's no immediate user report due to its comment to being ephemeral audio. Due to its commitment to being ephemeral audio, meaning that it is resilient on or reliant on users themselves to alert the app of troublemakers. In the meantime, thousands of people can easily listen to misinformation on the app. A Clubhouse spokesperson told Vice News, every single day, doctors, nurses, and other medical professionals on Clubhouse are leading discussions about COVID that answer questions, assuage concerns, and challenge incorrect information about the virus and our vaccines. Our published guidelines and our trust and safety system allows for conversations where people can learn while also permitting us to take action against conversations that may be dedicated to intentionally misinforming people.
I think this is just it's just more reflection of the bubble, of the social media bubbles. Like there's all sorts of stuff about the Texas abortion law and it's interesting to see in these anti-vax rooms how the random shit that is offered as quote unquote a cure is not subjected to nearly as many tests and questions as a vax, which has already gone through like the full FDA approval process and has been taken by millions, right? So it's really shocking. They get very defensive. But the biggest issue here is that people dissolve or devolve into their own bubbles, and they hear what they want to hear. That people are not necessarily seeking information, they're seeking community. So that's what is happening here. It's just another social media app, not better or worse than anything else. And that is what we see. We're not forcing people to mix. We're not even forcing people to mix in offices anymore. So you're not even forced to be civil with people that may have, different backgrounds, different viewpoints, or anything like that. When people are left to their own devices, they seek out identity and community, and that is what's happening. And it's like the same thing with the Bitcoin maxi rooms. They're just reinforcing their own past decisions, not trying to get information for new decisions.
Absolutely. But in my opinion, Clubhouse is killing people. Unlike the Bitcoin maxi rooms, people are dying because of this misinformation. And I sit in these rooms, as I'm sure others have. I know Tyler listens in occasionally. I've seen him in the audience. And I just sit there and I block and report people. It's my sort of new hobby. But let's make no bones about it. People are dying because of these Clubhouse rooms. And none of the reporting seems to make a difference. I've tweeted to my 300,000 followers. I've reported rooms. I've tagged the founders of Clubhouse on these rooms, and nothing happens. So, it's fruitless.
It's the same
Clubhouse is
problem.
actually is much worse in terms of a lack of any kind of content moderation, whatever you want to call it, than a lot of other social media apps. I mean, I've reported multiple times. I mean, even a minor thing that there's like 7 accounts for the actress Charlize Theron, none of them which are real. They're all bots, probably, or fake. 7. They have 7 of them, and they can't figure out that they're not real, and they're still there. And like one or two of them actually follow me. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah,
Well,
and I think it's a whole nother level when you have life and death issues at hand. I mean, if you want to talk about, movie trivia or,
No,
Bitcoin,
but
it's
it's.
one
I
thing,
understand
but
your point, but my
it's
point is
life and death.
they don't have anything. So it's like whether it's that or this, they don't do anything. The only times Clubhouse does anything, it has to be like a major story in another publication, and you could say that a little bit about Facebook, but at least Facebook's even doing something. I mean, they're doing they're not doing nothing anymore, and Clubhouse does nothing unless it hits the larger media and embarrasses them.
Ken, let me jump in. Sorry
Right.
to whoever I'm interrupting. I'll hand it back real fast. But I'm gonna challenge that assertion briefly. In that, as I think Ken said, or Evan, I think everyone has seen me. I hang out in those rooms, and the reason I hang out in those rooms is because I'm simultaneously watching the analytics sites like clubhub.site, where it shows the number of people going in and out of the room in real time. So you can see the traffic swell go up and down like a stock chart. And And then I watch for Clubhouse team members who come in the room. And then after they come in the room, I look to see if they get a shadow ban or not, and if it makes the room start going down. And in the case of these Vax rooms, I was going to say a minute ago that I'm noticing less of them this week and last week than 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, where it got pretty bad for a while, where there was always 2 or 3 in the top 10 rooms, actually. And currently in the top 10 rooms, we are just behind number 2, and we'll probably pass them in the next, I don't know, few minutes. And then the very first one, as usual, is like an Indian room. That's very common these days. And then there's a Clubhouse. The recap is number 2. We're number 3, although we'll probably pass number 2 here shortly. And then there's the 10 Habits of Self-Made Millionaires room, which that group of Clubhouse users is incredibly persistent. And then there's number 5 is the New York City Vax mandate deadline, staff quits, National Guard steps in, ? Exclamation point.
Yeah, they all have very clever titles too. It's not like this is an anti-vax room. They pose these reasonable questions, and then you listen to the room, and it's complete garbage.
Right. Well, they've gotten better. They've gotten better at concealing. And if you're a Clubhouse addict like many of us are, exactly as Evan says, is you and I know, Evan, by reading that title, that's an anti-vaxxer room, because they've gotten good at tossing it up as a question, because if it's a question, the early days, they weren't questions. And then when you're making a statement in your title of your room, well, you can be held accountable for that. You're spreading misinformation, but by intelligently, I didn't say you were a Nazi. I'm just asking, are you a Nazi? So it's, it's not misinformation. It's a question. So, they're playing a fun game of course, it has to be a question, because their intent is anyway. But watch the data traffic on that one. That one hasn't been open that long. Inevitably, they'll get a couple reports. They'll get around somebody. But to answer your question, Ken, they actually are moderating, but how they're doing it is quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Covert. Because what they do is they do it in a way where the room creators themselves don't realize they've been moderating. They do this very soft shadow ban where they'll come in, they'll reduce the visibility of the room. They have their own app, the admins, and in their app, as the hidden admins who are the moderators of the hallway, they can go to any room like the one we're in now, and they can boost the visibility of that room by 3 levels, a little bit or a lot, and they can reduce the visibility of that room by a little or a lot. And so these Vax rooms, what they do is they go in there, they listen, they say it's okay, it's misinformation, and they reduce the visibility once they establish that it's an anti-vax room, and then it slowly drops down. And how you do that is when people are looking through their hallway in the Clubhouse app, they don't see that one until they get to the very bottom of the hallway and click show me more or whatever. It's kind of hidden from the main hallway view. So it's, over time, it just diminishes. And they try and kill it without obviously killing it. Because if you give it greatly less visibility, then nobody sees the room in the hallway. And when they tell their friends, hey, come into our room, we're in Clubhouse right now, come check it out. And they're like, I don't see it in the hallway. Where are you? And they're like, oh, we must have been shadow banned. And they don't want to tip them off that they've been shadow banned. So they do the soft shadow ban. So it's kind of at the bottom of the hallway. So it takes time for the room to die, sometimes a few hours. So that's their type of moderation. It's not
in a few hours you can do a lot of damage. And
fair enough.
I've been in different
toxic rooms, not just even about the vax stuff. I mean, they have a lot of issues here. It's actually, by the way, Tyler, one of the reasons that some of my friends on Wall Street who were very bullish on Clubhouse when it got started are very negative on Clubhouse now because of the toxicity of a whole bunch of the rooms.
Well, to your point, we do have now the number 8th largest room is COVID-19 war is coming, vaxxed versus unvaxxed. So we have 2 in the top 10 again. So fair enough.
The other thing that you've got to remember is, as much as this is ridiculous, as much as this is the same problem that Twitter has had with and then they brought in their sort of fact checking and the little tag that comes on the tweets like with Donald Trump and whatnot, is when when you need the content and you need the engagement and you need the graph of how many rooms you've got and how popular each room is, where do you draw the line when some of your most engaging content, whether it be good or bad or defamatory or completely untrue or even sort of inciting anger and hatred speech and everything else, what do you do when half of your content creators are sort of quasi-sentient cucumbers who are generally hurting people, like with what they're saying, because it's popular? That's the issue here. That's the fact
I
that,
mean,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's my
Maybe
new
it'll
band
cut
name,
down though, because
Sentient Cucumber.
do you remember? Do you remember they used to have those shade rooms? I don't know if, like, it depends also on what your feed is, but they used to have a real problem with these shade rooms where, like, everybody would gang up on one person, and that person apparently had to sit in the like it was all these unspoken rules, but they would just talk about how a person was terrible, and one of the people who's in that, you know, the $1 million habits thing there. So the $1 million habits thing is run by a couple of people who are super shady. Like, in general, they're people who have scammed a lot of people. For me, I see black badges on a bunch of them because people in my network have blocked them. I know that several have been kicked out all the time, and one uses a sock puppet account. But they have huge numbers of followers because you can't keep people away from their, you know, whatever their drug of choice is, right? And if they want to feel like this person has the key to making them rich, then that is what they're going to go towards. You can't keep them from that. But there used to be these hate rooms where where people would gather huge crowds and all talk about how much they hated somebody. And I have seen those disappear. And I can't imagine it's because suddenly, you know, we changed from, you know, middle school mentality to college. That didn't happen. I think what happened is eventually they must have blocked or shadow banned enough of them that it reduced the inclination altogether. They were not getting enough traffic, so they stopped doing them. So hopefully, maybe the same thing will happen. I mean, maybe it's their, you know, their long haul technique, like you know, the boycott on South Africa that took like 20 years or whatever it is. Maybe it's their slow moving. Eventually, it will die in its own, and we'll avoid any controversy ourselves. And I don't know. I don't know if that's what they're looking for, because maybe it worked. I don't know.
Alex, maybe that'll work with the Binance saga. I think it'll work because the Binance saga continues.
Yeah, so
I tweeted it out, Tyler. The Binance saga continues.
Okay. The point of the article is about Clubhouse faces challenging misinformation problems, and Clubhouse spokesperson about how the doctors who go in there and try to help find out that those people are not interested in information or facts or anything of the like. I think Jennifer made the point, they're looking for confirmation more than anything. And
Tyler, you know, you have to remember Abraham Lincoln's statement: "He who knows not and knows not that he knows not is a fool. Shun him."
yeah, well,
that's actually Shakespeare, but Lincoln
Is it? I
repeated it.
can't remember.
Yes,
but we know not.
The point of I think they've been deplatformed from a lot of places, and they come here and they're able to engage, and you know, I think that's a very powerful thing for folks who are being deplatformed in other platforms, so they're ending up, you know, wherever they can go. So yeah, I think that's part of it. So the next big article is Tesla begins letting drivers request the full self-driving beta, prompting criticism from regulators and safety advocates. And the next one's from Bloomberg. At China Annual World Internet Conference, executives from Alibaba, Tencent, Xiaomi, Tesla, Qualcomm, and others praised President Xi's common prosperity policy. What a surprise. What did you expect them to say about Uncle Xi's new common prosperity policy? They were invited there by the CCP. That would be truly fantastic indeed if somebody were to counter the official narrative of the event.
Tyler?
Yes.
I hate to drag you back. Can I just make a quick comment on the Tesla one?
Sure.
Very, very quick. that they're doing, which is really interesting about this, is the rollout. To get allowed into the rollout, you have to accept terms and conditions where Tesla collects and analyzes every aspect of your driving. So hard braking, turning, G-forces, acceleration, everything. And you get a live score, basically how you're driving, if you're a safe driver out of 100. And if you keep it within a certain sort of band for a period of time, then you get access potentially to the self-driving beta. So it's just a really interesting take on, like, going forward, you could have this availability of sort of the introduction of AI driving, but only to drivers who have proven maybe that they are a little bit more careful at the wheel and attentive and ready to take over at any time just in case it fails.
Yeah.
Going back to your Chinese news there, Tyler, yes. I'm curious to know how the general population is taking the president's kind of antics. From a Western perspective, obviously it's like, that's just crazy, crazy sauce there. But from the general populace, I think that sits quite well. It's like,
probably does.
I think it's probably like, yeah, of course, it's the better of the all and the good of the whole society that counts, not just one freaking guy who's been anyways getting so much. I'm thinking that there's so many deals behind the like all of these CEOs kind of rise from even the government that, anyways, that's just my thinking, that the Chinese are actually quite happy with this.
Yes, I imagine they are. Because the whole point is wealth redistribution from the billionaires. They're trying to shrink the wealth disparity. So the people who are the have-nots, of course, are likely to be very enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, and would you think about it, like, would they actually argue, like, if I would go to Shenzhen to the entrepreneur hubs or whatever, would they argue, then I hope to first become really, really rich, and then I want to distribute it to everyone? That's the Chinese model. I don't want to be Jeff Bezos. I want to distribute it everywhere when I'm rich enough.
That was the theory of Reaganomics, and we see how that worked out. Give me that money. I'm going to pass it on. I promise, really.
Well, there's a difference. Here's they're forcing it, right? So,
You know it's going to trickle down. The forced trickle down. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is Robert, real quick. But aren't they a society that prioritizes stability? I know we're talking about redistribution of money. It is a higher solve about, if we don't solve this, there could be instability. And stability is one of the core missions for some countries like that versus free speech, all the money you can make too. So think about those things too. Just Rob, I'm out.
Okay. Yep. The article says, basically that all of the Chinese tech, interestingly, it wasn't the leaders. It was like the vice presidents who all attended and made speeches saying that they're committed to the wealth redistribution proposals and whatnot.
That's a signal.
Yep.
So anyway, Chinese authorities have also warned in recent months against the disorderly expansion of capital in platform economies and required and financial to undergo a rectification program after a surprise halt of what was set to be the world's largest IPO in recent weeks, and agreed to share data from all its small loan services with the Chinese Central Bank's Credit Reference Center, and is said to be creating a separate app for its loan business and bringing it. Okay, we know more than Bloomberg does on these issues. So the next big one is, kind of related. A secondary article that's tied to that one. It says a senior Chinese regulator says China will increase its focus on online healthcare, smart delivery, autonomous vehicles, and platform economies. And then the next one is that somebody who's called the Phone Repair Guru, who has a website, they made a report on the repairability of the iPhone 13. And what they noticed is the report finds that third-party repair centers will struggle to replace iPhone 13's broken screens, because if you take your iPhone to anywhere other than an Apple store to repair the screen, it will make the Face ID no longer work on your phone, and you'll have to type in your code every time to open your phone. So kind of forcing you to take it to Apple if you want to continue to use Face ID. And then
isn't that?
Yeah, it's my understanding they've been coding some of their hardware components to the phone for a little while now, which is quite interesting. So you can't just swap out components. There was a good YouTube video where people tried this. They tried swapping out camera modules or various different modules. They just don't work on a different phone. I'm not sure which phone onwards. It's probably the 12. But yeah.
Yeah, I had this problem myself.
This is probably actually related to security, because if you can manipulate the hardware to present faces that aren't really in front of the phone, then you can basically hack entry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this has been true for a number of years now, and it was first an issue with the fingerprint sensor. So there are valid points on both sides. Obviously, Apple is going to use the security cover when it suits them, and clearly they've gotten really good at this over the past few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, batteries as well. Carl made a great point about how they have clever ways of making sure you use Apple authenticated parts and Apple authenticated repair places, and it's interesting, and it might come back to bite them in the butt and make governments do what they just did with the cable issue and force them, to be more quote unquote user friendly, which Apple will say is actually against users' own best interests, and the EU and the US will say, well, we disagree. USB-C will be the default, regardless whether you think that's best or not, Apple. We've made a decision for you. As a government, we want USB-C cables. Thank you very much. And we want to be able to replace the batteries with far cheaper batteries and at far cheaper repair places. And, that's just how it's going to go down. I don't see how they're going to convince the governments otherwise.
Well, and of course they just give you the adapter, right? Just like, you complained about the headphone jack, so they gave you a digital to analog adapter to stick in, right? Not the same, but and it doesn't actually, in some ways it makes it more complicated, but they complied with your silly regulation. Now quit bothering me, right?
Well, more to the point, this isn't the first time about the port moving away from the stereo jack. The EU did pretty much a similar thing with USB micros, and forcing all the Android-based companies over to using the same micro port. And to Andy's point, Apple did exactly that. And they were like, okay, here's an adapter. We're going to continue using Lightning. We're not going to move over to micro. Here's an adapter. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes differently in any way.
Mm-hmm. The next one is that California Governor Gavin Newsom signs a law mandating that light-duty autonomous vehicles emit zero emissions by 2030. Starting in 2030, California will require all light-duty autonomous vehicles that operate in the state to emit zero emissions. And next one from Washington Post, that extremism researchers say that the autonomous recent hack of Epic, EPIK, is the mother of all data loads and will let them map the ecosystem of extremist websites and organizations. And what they're referring to is a hack that we reported when it happened in real time last week of Epic, EPIK, which is a kind of where a lot of extremist websites end up if they get deplatformed everywhere else, because Epic has a very strong policy, content neutral policy, where they don't care what your content is about and they don't want to get involved, and they're kind of very strong on free speech and First Amendment. So, which is becoming a unique differentiator in the space of hosting lately. So hence they're going to get a lot of the the folks that aren't welcome anywhere else. And then Anonymous hacked their system and found out who's hosting all of those extreme sites. So it's about to get very interesting. And those sites will get shut down a different way by social hackers, so to speak. They're cybersecurity experts who then become social hackers and then find out where they work and get them in trouble there, and then find out where they live and get them kicked out of their house, and just make life very intolerable for those folks. So it's going to be very interesting. Johan, you want to make a comment on that? No? Okay. Next one, Wall Street Journal. And as Israeli unicorns rise from 1 5 years ago to 13 in June, a look at the startup scene's impact on Tel Aviv, including booming housing and living costs. Yep, Tel Aviv is booming with tech, just like Stockholm and a few other super geeky cities with a lot of smart geeks and a whole lot of investors. The next one's from Variety. TikTok says it now has 1 billion monthly active users. TikTok says it has crossed a key milestone. The social video app claims it now counts more than 1 billion monthly active users. TikTok is the successor to Musical.ly, the short-form video app that was acquired by Chinese internet giant ByteDance in 2017. And the next one is a look at China from the New York Times. A look at China's complex relationship with video games and the impact of new regulations aimed at minors, with many finding workarounds. China has a complex relationship with video games. New government rules for minors have made it even more so. China's video game industry is booming, says the New York Times, which it is. But kids are being limited to 1 hour only on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and no gameplay during the weekdays. So the New York Times just learned of this, which we covered extensively 2 weeks ago when it actually happened. So the next one is from...
I love the quote in that article, by the way, about how, the age of consent, sexual consent is 14, but you have to be now, I've forgotten the age now, considerably older, right, to be able to play video games.
Yeah, that was a viral tweet that somebody made in China when that rule happened 2 weeks ago. That was perhaps the most viral tweet in China that week, 2 weeks ago, when the new regulation came into play. And yeah, the young folks, one young guy tweeted that and caught the sentiment of the moment for all of the users there. The Benedict Evans tweeted about this particular New York Times article, saying, given that parts of the Chinese government are cracking down on games and calling them spiritual opium, and that Apple disclosed half of the App Store revenue comes from half of 1% of the users paying hundreds of dollars a month on pay-to-win casual games, when does that hammer come down? The next one from...
This is the big secret, by the way, in the App Store business, right? Is just how much of that revenue is coming from, quote unquote, free games.
Yeah, and whales and so UK's CMA says it has cleared Facebook's planned 1 billion acquisition of Customer with a K, as the deal is not likely to reduce competition. Okay, and then the next one is Russia demand that Apple and Google and other foreign tech companies employ local operatives who can be prosecuted, likely influenced removing Navalny's app. This is from Wired, and they've already we read this headline a month ago, and we predicted this headline 3 months ago when India was doing this to Twitter and everybody. So Wired has got word of this, and again, we're weeks ahead as usual. And it started in India, where the tech giants were doing business in India. India made a new rule saying you have to have people on the ground physically. And everyone complied. Twitter was a bit slow, and the India said, we're not joking around. You got to have somebody physically. And Twitter said, oh, we hired a lawyer. No, that doesn't count. It has to be an employee, an actual employee. And Twitter kind of, lagged a little too long. And India said, fine, you don't think we're serious? You just lost your legal protections as a platform. You're now responsible for everything that is said on your platform. And sure enough, 0.00000001 seconds later, somebody said something illegal on their platform. And it's more than 1 billion people after all, so it was bound to happen. And sure enough, the state says, you just had some illegal stuff. We need to arrest your person here on the ground. Anyway, so I think other countries saw what had happened there and took note. And I said, other countries are going to take note, most notably Russia. And sure enough, here Russia said, you have to have people on the ground. But that was weeks ago. So this new headline from Wired, that in Russia, Apple and Google staff get muscled by the state, is the headline. And we saw that with Twitter. As when Twitter had team members on the ground in Delhi, and there was a tweet by the official spokesperson of India, and Twitter flagged it as a untruthful tweet or misinformation. That led 6 or 7 heavies in uniforms down to Twitter's office in Delhi, in the lobby, which was caught on a live stream that we watched in real time in this room. Somebody sent the link, and we saw these dudes in the lobby. And unlucky for Twitter, their team members had taken the day off and were not at the office. It would be very interesting to see what would have happened. And interesting, they were all kind of big dudes, interestingly. And anyway, in Russia, a similar thing happened in a very dark dystopian way, where Russia just had an election. A bunch of voting happened over the weekend. And on Friday, Putin told Apple and Google to remove an app from their stores, which was a very special app. It happened to be the app of his main political opponent, Mr. Alexei Navalny. And Apple and Google didn't want to remove it. Obviously, they believe in fair elections. And then Russia named the employees of Apple and Google that they were going to incarcerate if they didn't remove the app. So they literally said, these employees of yours, their actual names, these are the people that we are taking to jail today if you don't remove the app. And so they removed the app. And that's why the headline today in Wired says, in Russia, Apple and Google staff get muscled by the state. Yeah, that's what happened. When U.S. tech companies opened offices there, it was supposed to mitigate oppression. Instead, those workers are now vulnerable to threats from local authorities. Oh, wow, what a big surprise. We're so shocked here at Tech News Around the World that this happened. Give me a fucking break. We told you this was going to happen. We said precisely this is the whole fucking point. Why do you think they need to have physical people on the ground? Why do you think they're requiring you have physical people on the ground? They could just email you and say, hey, take out that app, and you could ignore them. That's why you need physical people on the ground, so that they can, muscle them, as the headline says. Earlier this month, when the Kremlin told multiple big tech companies to suppress political oppression amid nationwide elections in Russia, their answer was unequivocal. No. Exactly right. That is what happened. Yet 2 weeks later, Apple and Google deleted from their app stores the smart voting app opposition leader Alexei Navalny and his party, primary tool for consolidating votes against Vladimir Putin's regime. Telegram and Google-owned YouTube also restricted access to the recommendations for opposition candidates that Navalny was sharing on those platforms. Putin, of course, was ecstatic. The U.S. tech companies' sudden knee-bending didn't just hurt the opposition's ability to communicate to Russian people, it also marked the dangerous effectiveness of new Kremlin policy, forced tech firms to put employees on the ground so they can be coerced and threatened into doing Kremlin's bidding. For all that the world's politicians and analysts discussed internet censorship in technical terms, this episode is a powerful reminder that old-fashioned force can decisively tighten a state's grip on the web. Putin's regime.
Tyler?
Yes.
Why isn't it an old-fashioned thing for these multinationals to know that once upon a time you hired key family members and put them in these roles? You know what I mean? Regardless of their competency. I know that sounds bad, but I think they'd be a little slow arresting Putin's daughter.
Ah, interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, hire people that are friends of the state and say, yeah, go ahead and arrest them.
Also, isn't Navalny in prison or dying somewhere? I mean, is there even an election with him? It's unusual. Side note. Thanks.
Yeah. I don't know the current state of his health, but he was in bad shape when he got poisoned.
No, but the point of the app was really to create a shadow, a parallel voting system to show his popularity. That was the point, and they don't like that. They want, because then they can start claiming that there's, it's rigged.
So it said that the article ends by saying Google, Apple, YouTube, and other companies need to think much harder about the cost and risk of having employees on the ground who the Kremlin can threaten. Closing their Russian offices might prompt the Russian government to use technical measures against the website, such as throttling access from within Russia, as it did with Twitter back in April, which we covered in real time. Yet these companies are no strangers to facing technical blocking attempts in autocracies, and censorship demands over email or the phone are much easier to ignore when the state cannot haul employees into detention centers or interrogation rooms and threaten their physical safety. Theoretically, I guess in this case, the American tech companies in Russia must be very upfront with whoever they decide to list as their quote unquote employees. And I think that's kind of a brilliant move to hire people who are friends of Putin, so that when Putin says, but hire people who, when you hiring them, say, hey, are you quite friendly with Putin? We're looking for people who are very friendly with Putin.
Oh, Tyler, it used to be done. I mean, people must have forgotten. But even if they're not tech savvy, they could be leading the group or something, or they're involved.
Right.
And
My point.
It's been done for centuries.
Right. And that would be a very interesting move. Pay them very nicely. We're looking for actual friends of Putin. You said you're a friend of Putin. Great. Now here's what's going to happen. In the event that the Kremlin says they're going to, arrest our team members, we're not going to comply. We're going to let you get arrested. Are we clear on this? We're clear on this, right? Please sign here. Our lawyers would like you to sign this in blood 50 times. Thank you. Okay, we're crystal clear here. Thank you. Welcome to Team Google. And go home and watch TV and collect your paycheck. So the next time the Kremlin says, hey, take down this YouTube channel that we don't like, you can say no. And they'll say, no, we're going to go get your employee. Knock yourself out. Go get them. Here's their address. So as long as you're...
Tyler?
Yes.
And on a separate note, just breaking news I just got, which is about in Greece, and they've had their wildfires, but they've just had a 5.8 earthquake, 5.8 megaton earthquake, and one person died. I've just tweeted it out with a video.
Okay.
Yeah, centered on Crete, the island of Crete.
On Crete, yeah.
Okay.
So just on these representatives who might be friends of whoever's running an autocracy. I mean, the thing is, they might give them signing authority, and then that could lead to all kinds of other problems. So I'm not sure that this is really a solution.
I think it is. I think it could be legally, if done correctly. You don't give them any real power. And
no, but they could embezzle Apple, for example.
So, yeah, it's called nominees in Southeast Asia. You just hire these nominees who fill the role of, the legal requirement that they be employees, and just give them, they're just pencil pushers or whatever. I imagine they'll be happy to take the role, Anyway, a few more of the popular articles here. One is UK cybersecurity startup Senson, which uses a triangulation approach to mitigate attacks, raises $20 million. Spotify begins a campaign to win more advertisers, rebranding its ad business as Spotify Advertising, focusing on small and medium businesses and expanding its podcast marketplace, which is great for podcasters. That means you get automatic sponsors embedded in your podcast, so you get paid as a podcaster. That's going to help them win the podcast war, which, by the way, they just passed Apple Podcast as the leading podcast app. Or it's built into the apps, but in terms of podcasting distribution, they've surpassed Apple Podcast. London Metropolitan Police sign a £3 million 4-year deal with Japan's NEC Cooperation for Facial Recognition, which uses historical data to find suspects. And they have a lot of cameras. Holy shit, do they got a lot of cameras they can plug that into. So your facial recognition is powered by images and videos. And boy, does London have a whole lot of videos. So doing crimes in London got a whole lot harder. Oh boy, a whole lot harder. IBM's Mayflower autonomous ship, which collects marine data, will try to sail across the Atlantic in the spring 2022 after failing its first attempt in June. And what else? A Singapore-based e-commerce logistics startup called Ninja Van raises $578 million at a $1 billion valuation. And Thailand has a new unicorn. And that Australia recognizes electronics payment system as its first private company that taps into their new digital ID system, which is being used even for government stuff. So here comes the whole digital ID thing. And yeah, so now we're going to get into the tweets. Anyone have a particularly hot tweet they want to do? Well, let me find the one that Asif just sent in here so we can retweet out the video of the earthquake in Crete.
I was fascinated by a new book out called, let me find the name of it, Red Roulette. It's an insider story of wealth, power, and corruption and vengeance in today's China by Desmond Shum. And I tweeted that out. Fascinating story about essentially one of the richest women in China was disappeared.
Yes, his wife. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a 60 Minutes Australia just did a whole interview with him, the author of that book. Someone please find the video. It's on YouTube. I just watched the video yesterday. And so this gentleman is a billionaire in China. His wife is a billionaire. Life was good. She's very connected with the number 2 person in China next to President Xi. And some weird, as he makes the point in his interview, he's living in London, although he doesn't want to say that. He's living in the UK, and he and his lawyers are paranoid about his location being found, they say in the beginning of the interview. This guy's clearly super intelligent, speaks great English. They have a son together. One day, the wife disappears, just completely disappears out of the blue. 4 years later, no, she's not been heard or seen from nobody, nothing. But it's known that she's best friends with the CCP, so clearly they've got something to do with it. And recently, she calls out of the blue and says, "How are you? How's our son? And then talks to the son on the phone. How tall are you now? How much do you weigh?" And the timing of her call is very interesting. She calls on the eve of him about to launch a book exposing the corruption of the CCP and how they made his wife disappear. And she calls, miraculously, mysteriously, to say, "Oh, hi, how are you? Please don't release the book." Something you wouldn't want something terrible to happen to God. What was the phrasing? She implied that either she or he or their son would be killed if the book is released. In Chinese, it's unclear who she's referring to. Somebody's life will be lost. You wouldn't want someone to lose their life over this. It's not worth risking a life over this, she says. And he doesn't think he means her. And he, the man who wrote the book, who's doing the interview with 60 Minutes, which just aired yesterday. So if somebody can find that and send that in, you want to talk about a bone-chilling interview. This guy's like, I've now have to work with the UK authorities to hide everything and have bodyguards and hide and, identity redo and the whole deal because the CCP is going to come kill me. And he says exactly that. Like, I'm a dead man walking by doing this book because I explain how why? Because he makes the whole point, which you hear, maybe depending on which circles you swim in, billionaires, there's a the more than any disease, the worst thing you could do to shorten your lifespan in China in 2021 is to become a billionaire. There's lots of billionaires that magically disappear.
I know one.
So he goes into why that is, because he's one of those billionaires who he got the word that shit was getting serious. He fled. He begged the wife to come with him. She didn't. She disappeared. So he likely would have disappeared. So he's telling the story of why he knows he would have disappeared, why his friends have disappeared, why his wife disappeared, why Chinese billionaires magically disappear. And then the journalist asks, where do they go? He goes, they go to jail. And interestingly, when the wife called to say, I'm just calling to let you know somebody's life will be lost if you release this book. And he says, well, tell whoever is telling you to call me, that I'm going to fight this to the end. And she, interestingly, he did some very clever questions to his wife on the phone call. He figured out that she didn't even know COVID was happening, meaning she's been incarcerated. Unless that's a very special rock you would have to live under to not know that there's a pandemic happening, is it not? And she didn't know something else that indicated that she had been clearly and heavily incarcerated and shut off from all of society. I forget what the other question was, but it was a very clever way to figure out that she clearly has not seen the light of day.
That's this was really recently
quarantining too. Over there.
some top-notch quarantine they got over there. Yeah, she didn't even know it was happening. Really interesting interview. And 60 minutes is as good as it gets in journalism. So watch the interview. It's unbelievable. But he just released the book as Red Roulette, is it called, Evan?
There's a Daily Mail article I tweeted at Tech News if you want to see the article version.
But interestingly, he's saying like he's not expecting, you can see he's grieved in just giving the interview. He's doing it to promote the book, of course. He just wants the word to get out. He knows he's going to be killed, but he feels like the world needs to know, and it's kind of his payback for his wife being disappeared. Anyway, wild scenario there. Professor Osif, I don't see, can you send it to me in my DMs as you normally do with this Crete video of the earthquake so that we can retweet it? All right.
Sure, Tyler.
Okay.
Give me 2 minutes.
Sure. Okay, so now we get into the fun part, which is all of the tweets that everyone's tweeting in here, as we always do. And the first one's from Poppy, that Shopify just made a huge move to boost its international sales. Partnering with this cross-border company was a stroke of pure genius, it says. In the realm of e-commerce, Shopify used by entrepreneurs to sell their goods and services online. The company has more than 1.7 million merchants worldwide, up from 1 million last year. Yet, investors may be surprised to find that the vast majority of Shopify's merchants are located in North America. In fact, data suggests roughly 56% of merchants using the platform reside in the US and Canada alone. Selling beyond their own geographical borders represents a massive opportunity for merchants, and Shopify just made a decision to help sellers take the next big step. Earlier this month, the company announced the debut of Shopify Markets, a new hub that helps merchants pursue and manage global commerce opportunities. The platform helps remove the complexity of international commerce and empowers independent merchants to sell to consumers around the world, Shopify said in their press release. Shopify Markets is no doubt the result of a broader collaboration and partnership with Global E Online, which trades on the NASDAQ. The company works to make cross-border sales a reality for online retailers by eliminating many of the challenges associated with international commerce. And they're a publicly traded company, NASDAQ, and Shopify named Global E the executive provider of cross-border services for the merchants on the platform, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's nice. So thank you for that one, Poppy. And the next one is from Joe Williams. That's a space weather alert, a geomagnetic storm watch raised for Mondays. Auroras have been seen as low as New York and Idaho. Oh, the Aurora Borealis is now being seen as far south as New York and Idaho, which means there's a whole lot of geomagnetic storm activity happening. And that could mean a massive solar flare, which could mean wiping out the internet and satellites. Good times. Good fun. No more internet. No more satellites if you have a massive solar flare, which we're kind of expecting to happen. So the next one, also from Joe Williams, is predictive transactions are the next big tech revolution. Imagine this. An Amazon truck shows up each week with all the things it predicts you need and an easy way to return anything you don't want. And we've got to wait for VentureBeat to load. Yeah, predictive transactions, which Amazon knows enough about you that its algorithms are getting quite good, and it kind of knows what you need and you want. And yeah, we're going to get there. So there's that article. The next one's from Poppy from Forbes. Google just issued a warning for 2 billion Chrome users. Google has issued an urgent upgrade warning to all Chrome users. No doubt a new 0-day vulnerability. Hit the update button on Chrome so you don't get hacked yet again. And then this next one from CNET. Google's upcoming smartphone, the Pixel 6, could get a few handy new camera features. The Pixel 6 could offer manual white balance adjustment. That would be fucking awesome, by the way. Magic erase and more built right into the phone. Fantastic. Love that. That would be nice. And the next one from Poppy is Facebook leading us on a journey to the metaverse. Nick Clegg will, on Monday, that's today, set out the tech giant's vision of a virtual world where you can work, shop, and live. But the move is prompting new fears over privacy because it's Facebook. Great point. And a Bitcoin miner is buying a power plant to mine crypto. And Mars probe records a big 1.5-hour Martian earthquake. NASA recently reported that its InSight lander, sent to observe geologic activity on Mars, recorded one of the biggest earthquakes yet. An 1.5-hour long earthquake on Mars. And broken iPhone 13 screens. We covered this one about the Face ID won't work if you don't let Apple replace your screen on iPhone 13. And a new recycled plastic was used to 3D print an entire sailing boat, which you can watch. I just tweeted that out. And Japan names China, Russia, and North Korea as cyberspace threats. Tough countermeasures planned as Tokyo drafts 3-year defensive strategy. And that's coincidentally the same 3 cybersecurity
Sent it to you,
threats.
Tyler.
Huh? Okay, thanks.
I've sent it to you back,
Yep. Okay, let's see. There we go. Thank you. The tweets from you. There it is. So just retweeting a video, 2 videos actually, of the rubbles of these in Crete, these earthquakes here. Really, really took down that whatever that building was in the video. That must have been one heck of an earthquake there. The next one from Faraz via Bloomberg is that YouTube CEO says Google sees free speech as a core value in Russia. Google CEO, Chief Executive Officer at YouTube said that the internet giant still holds free speech as a core value. Well, this is going to be a problem for you and your Russian employees, YouTube. They said the internet giant still holds free speech as a core value in the company's first public comment since it acceded to a Russian government order to remove material from political opponents. Google and Apple pulled the voting app from opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Asked about those removals, YouTube CEO says they consider free speech a core value of its platform. But when we work with governments, there are many things that we have to take in consideration, like our employees getting beaten the shit out of. Oh, no, I added that part. It says many things we must take into consideration, whether it's local laws or what's happening on the ground, like our employees getting beaten to a fucking pulp by the Kremlin goons. Oh, sorry. No, again, I'm just projecting perhaps. It says, we have many things to take into consideration, whether it's local laws or what's happening on the ground. So there's always going to be multiple considerations. Russian courts have banned online references to smart voting and declaring Navalny's organization extremists. And why not just call them terrorists? Just go all the way. Google faced...
Hey, let's not forget that this can happen to companies doing business in America, right? This is what a national security letter does. And even worse, you can get thrown in jail for talking about receiving the letter.
The Google faced threats that its Russian employees could be imprisoned to remove the voting app under threat to imprison local employees. Oh, hold on here. Google faced threats that its Russian employees could be imprisoned to remove the voting app under a threat to imprison local employees. That's a really weirdly worded sentence, Bloomberg. Google, the YouTube CEO declined to comment on specific requests from Russian officials, obviously. Google discloses removal requests from governments in the aggregate. Russia accounts for over half of the total since 2011. But Google doesn't share how often governments ask to pull YouTube footage or how the company responds. Google worker unrest rises after removal of Russia voting app. Oh boy. You see, now here this is what we've been talking about, where a big company makes a move and the employees say, "Oh, hell no. Those don't fit with my Gen Z values, dog." And I've never traveled outside of America, so free speech is the only thing that matters on planet Earth. So how dare you remove that app? I don't even know you, Google. I thought I worked here. I thought I knew who you were. I am now embarrassed to work here. Hey, Wall Street Journal, you want to see some crazy documents? I got some crazy shit over here. I'm a whistleblower, everybody. Watch out. I'll pull the goddamn pin. I swear to fucking God. Hey, New York Times, you want to see some crazy shit that we discovered in a doc over here last week? Come and get it. This is how this shit happens. You get disgruntled employees who feel like their boss is the enemy. And as this article says, Google worker unrest rises after removal of Russian voting app. Damn right. Absolutely, that is going to happen. Several U.S. politicians, human rights groups, and some Google employees blasted the recent decision from the company, which has long promoted itself as a champion of internet freedoms. Yep, that's why they work there. They think they're working for the good guys, and then they find out, oh, shit, I'm working for the bad guys. Oh, fuck me. What did I do with my life? I'm helping Satan. And now I've got to correct it. And the only way to correct it is to go leak some shit to some journalists and take down the man. We gotta blow up the machine. It's happening at Facebook as we speak. It's called the Facebook Files. It's a journalist at the Wall Street Journal who has a very disgruntled leaker at Facebook who's doing exactly this. And now Google's going to have it again too. And Apple very nearly had it last week with Ashley Gjovic, but Ashley took a different tack. Ashley said, "Hey, anyone else anyone else disgruntled, tell me your horror stories." And then she told journalists, "Hey, journalists, guess what? I've got 500 people that told me their horror stories." And they're like, "Great, tell them to us." And she's like, no. I'm going to hold these over the Apple's head, and I'm going to use these as leverage. And knowing that you're interested, now I'm going to have a meeting with Tim and say, "Hey, Tim, I've got not only do I have 500 former Apple employees who are disgruntled, I've got 100 journalists who are asking me for those 500 stories. So how much money do you have exactly for my settlement, for my severance package, Tim?" So far, Ashley's not revealed those horror stories. But welcome to big tech politics, internal employee politics in 2021. So in recent years, Russian opposition figures, blah, 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 the article goes on and on. But yeah, YouTube says, YouTube can say whatever it wants to say. I mean, I don't know that YouTube's opinion is of much importance in this. They're going to do what the governments tell them to do once they've got feet on the ground there. There are not always requests that make sense for us to honor. But in certain cases, we will honor them in that country, even though they don't make sense. That's what a great quote. I think we really want to make sure that we're working and serving audiences as much as we possibly can. And if it comes
their governments,
right. And if it comes to a point where there's an issue with the government, we'll do our best to always work that out. Fantastically worded comments from YouTube's CEO. There are not always those are not always requests that make sense for us. She means there are not always requests that make sense for us to honor, but in certain cases we will honor them in that country, even though they don't make sense. What you mean is,
Tyler?
yes.
Tyler, it sounds like a new mission statement that these guys need to start coming up with.
Yes. Do evil. Don't do evil unless that country asks us to do evil.
But the thing is, and this is a discussion that goes back to when Yahoo was first facing criticism in China for basically doing what the censors told them to do. It's like, look, if you have significant financial operations in any country, and they make you work through their legal system, you have a business entity that is essentially a creation of that state. It's licensed, or it's actually established as a fictitious entity that is part of their law, and they can say, look, you violated the law, we're seizing everything. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. But this is the way things work all around the world and have for a very long time. It's just that we don't usually come up against them.
This is the way.
It's the unfortunate way.
Don't do evil unless Putin asks you to. The next one from Faraz from Bloomberg is about how Elon Musk takes part in China event led by Xi Cooperation Pledge, meaning the wealth redistribution plan, but that doesn't really apply to Tesla. Although Elon did speak at the event, commits to support investment regardless of turbulent times. The next one is how crypto exchanges Ame stops taking China users as Beijing widens ban. Not widens ban, it went as wide as it can. Everything related to crypto is illegal now in China, and so the exchanges, like our friend CZ over there at which is CZ's exchange called Binance. Thank you. Binance. So now Binance is not accepting any Chinese accounts. Yeah.
How about I thought majority of their users are from China.
Yeah, well, CZ, you made a great point, which is CZ himself is from China.
That means he have to close shop soon. Okay, question: how about NFT in China? Alibaba and blah 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 who are selling on the platform, are they considered crypto?
That's a great question. That's somebody's got to do a little quick search on that.
Because that one can also do a lot of money laundering, for sure.
Yeah, and then Faraz sends in this one from Bloomberg that Didi's closest China rival eyes new fundraising of $600 million and an IPO. And why school bus drivers are leaving to work at Amazon is the article from Evan. Across the country, school districts are struggling to fill transportation jobs. The shortage helps explain systemic problems in the labor market. Did you get to
Here in Massachusetts, the governor had to call out the National Guard to drive buses because of it's the tight labor market, and school driving, bus driving sucks, and Amazon. So it's like a multitude of factors.
Wow.
And Tyler, you grew up in SoCal. You remember the RTD buses. if you remember, most of those, I don't want to say most, a lot of them were literally on crack while they were driving the buses. So maybe with Amazon's drug use policy loosening, maybe that's a factor.
Yeah, that could work. Yeah. Oh, that's why they want to go work at Amazon. Yeah. Yeah. You can hit the bottle while on the work. So, what about Donish? Did you jump in? Did Dr. Donish jump in the room here? He just DM'd to say he was joining, and we had that article that he was named in from Vice today.
Yeah, I'll pin him.
He says he's joining now. The next one is from Shirok from the Wall Street Journal. AstraZeneca breast cancer drug found to reduce risk of dying. Well, that's how drugs work typically. The drug maker said that their drug called Enhertu significantly reduced the risk of death or disease progression in women with advanced disease in large clinical trial for breast cancer. That's fantastic. Main cause of death in women, isn't it? Breast cancer.
No, breast cancer is quite treatable these days.
Heart disease.
Heart disease would be number one.
This is an outcome study, isn't it? So it's a pretty important study. Then I haven't looked at it, but maybe John has.
And then one that maybe John could comment on. In fact, he said this yesterday in the MedTech room. COVID will end up resembling common cold by spring next year, leading experts say. And in Norway kind of said the same as well today.
Yeah, it's very likely that this will become endemic in a way that resembles the common cold, and as a silver lining, we're going to start recognizing that the common cold. There are 4 common cold coronaviruses that, as far as we know, have been around for thousands of years, and COVID is just the first one we've witnessed its birth, evolution from pandemic, and hopefully soon endemic. And I say hopefully because that'll reflect the fact that we've reached herd immunity and we can go about our business. However, the silver lining is that we're recognizing all these long-term consequences, collectively known as long COVID, that we will probably now be able to probe as distinctly sequelae to other viruses, whether the 4 common cold coronaviruses or non-coronaviruses that lead to these long-term side effects that emerge from cross-reactivity of the immune system reaction to COVID with natural antigens in humans. And so it is going to significantly inform our understanding of the interplay of viruses and the immune system and autoimmune-like diseases. And the last thing I'll say is that I was really worried that any number of these vaccines, because of the mechanism of cross-reactivity and the emergence of these autoimmune disorders collectively known as long COVID, would be much more frequent with the vaccines than they are, because the goal of the vaccine is intending to get an immune reaction. So I think it adds further weight to the extraordinary success of the vaccine campaigns in reducing the disease burden, as well as not creating a high incidence of these adverse reactions. So they're there, but they're pretty uncommon.
Okay.
So I need to point out that where countries have been determined to get COVID down to 0, they have been able to, even in the face of Delta in many cases, and we can get rid of this virus if we would be determined to, and we would take our efforts up a couple of levels. I agree that it is a very welcome development, as John was saying, that we're starting to understand some of the long-term effects of viral infections that have been lumped in to things like chronic fatigue syndrome or post-viral illness. And the answer has been, well, sorry, there's nothing we can do. Hopefully you get better over time, when in fact there's probably a lot going on that needs a lot more study. But with not just vaccination, but better PPE and much more extensive testing and tracing. Tracing becomes much more effective when you get the incidence down, and it's been done over and over and over again. But in the U.S., we kind of think that, well, people will never put on masks, and that is what really needs to change.
I have some bad news from Singapore, though. Remember, they were trying to test, to experiment on the kind of living with COVID kind of strategy.
Yes.
But they have started to take tighten the measures again, because the cases went up to close to 2,000, and they have actually tightened the measures, and the schools, and the children are kind of asked to do homeschool from next month onwards, I think. So that's for Singapore.
Tyler,
But for Japan,
Danish is here.
if you look at the cases, it actually came down a lot. So for Tokyo, we are actually less than, I think based on yesterday's data was about 400 cases now. So it's a good thing. If you look at the chart, it's very similar to India. It went very high up and then come down again. So I hope that's good news for us in Japan. Oh, and there's no lockdown. I just went for a live music drinks and dinner on Saturday, but of course with mask.
Nice.
And
Tyler,
high
Danish
quality
is
masks,
here.
right?
Okay, great. So Danish, let's do this article from Vice about Clubhouse. Is he raising his hand? Sorry. There we go.
You have to pull him up.
I did.
Hey guys.
Welcome back.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I was gonna say that so Sophia Geller, she's the one on Vice that has been working towards misinformation. This is how big of a problem it's become, that her entire job is just to report on misinformation right now, because across all these different channels. So she interviewed a bunch of the Clubhouse doctors, including myself, and kind of asked a little bit about what's been going on. And interestingly, as we went through it, what many people don't know is that we do a lot of vaccine rooms, and some of the anti-vaxxers have actually taken our likeness and have created new profiles, including our faces, but with like the Chinese flag in the background, or the Russian flag in the background, or imitating us. And a lot of the people have gotten a little bit spooked by this. Some people have actually had people reach out to medical societies and build websites. It's actually, if you guys Google me, there's something called the Guion Journal, which is not an actual journal, but they said that I was, I was working for pharmaceutical companies, or or because my company Resilient was actually backed by Melinda French Gates's venture firm, Pivotal Ventures, that I was actually a crony of Bill Gates and all this stuff.
Oh boy, they got you there.
They got me there. And so, the isn't that nuts? And it's like, it was, and so we kind of talked about this whole Clubhouse misinformation issue. And most importantly, we talked about how there has not been an official statement made from Clubhouse, even admitting that this is a problem. And so they went to Clubhouse.
I don't think they want to. I think they just want to softly shadow ban them.
But they haven't even shadow banned them. So if you ever go and you report somebody, they don't even send you an email to tell you what's going on, or say that, hey, we're taking you seriously.
Right.
Nothing, like zero. And it kind of goes into the ether. And so they actually got in this article, Sophia, she got a
comment,
a statement,
yeah,
a comment from Clubhouse, which is not even worth reading, because it was a very like, hey, we have rules and regulations,
right,
we follow those rules and regulations, blah, blah, blah. Exactly. And so that, the one thing that's happened because of this is, you guys may have noticed that there has been a growth in the anti-vax rooms and a significant decrease in the COVID information rooms, not misinformation, information rooms. A bunch of the doctors, so Dr. Graham Walker, who by the way is the founder of MD Calc, and Shah Murali and Siab Panwar, all of these like incredible physicians who, some of whom, and Tahir Ahmed, some of these doctors were actually at the front lines in New York, taking care of people. They've seen their colleagues die, and they came onto Clubhouse to help. And they have now, not just a few of them, she did some analysis. She didn't report this part, but she did some analysis by reaching out to a bunch of the doctors that had big followings, and over half of them have quit Clubhouse. And so there you go. We did it. The anti-vaxxers won. And that's the issue, is that because Clubhouse has done nothing about it. That was what this article was really about.
Okay, now you bring up a great point, because looking at right now the top 10 rooms in all of Clubhouse, let's do a refresh here. We number one, well, that here's the top 10. Number 1 is Clubhouse, the recap. Number 2 is Tech News Around the World. Number 3, Thank Your Ass Off with AJ Jacobs. And number 4, Level Up Your Executive Presence. Number 5 is the New York City Vax Mandate Deadline. Staff quits. National Guard steps in? ? Exclamation point. Number 6, Daily Stock Market Discussion. Number 7, COVID-19 War is Coming. Vaxxed versus unvaxxed, with an interesting misspelling in there. And that's the top 7. So number 5 and number 7 are both anti-vax rooms, right? So,
and they have huge followings, right? I mean, like, I think I don't know how many people are in the rooms, but it's pretty big, isn't it?
245 and 235 respectively. And what's the point is that there's usually 2 rooms in the top 10 quite often these days. And your point is a very important one, which is in the battle over the information, the doctors are losing and then dropping out of Clubhouse out of frustration, or they go into that. Here's what's really happening is the doctors go into that room. That room is full of 245 people who don't want to hear a doctor, say what they're saying, and then click the ban button, right? And if you get some number, X number of people clicking the ban button, you get banned. You'll get a 1-week suspension. This happened to my friend Jason, who is at Jason on Instagram and on Twitter, and who was my nominee to bring me into Clubhouse, which you can see in my bio. And so we know that happened because he and I took down JT Fox, and we got him banned. If you guys, Cheryl will remember when we did those rooms, right? So we were breaking up all of those crazy scam rooms, and we brought in Barbara from Shark Tank to say on stage, "Oh my God, that shit is a crazy fucking scam," and that she accidentally went into that room and got up on stage, and then came into our room and said, "Thank you for saving me. Holy shit, that shit is poison and needs to be removed from the app." And Jason paid a bit of a price by getting banned for a week, a suspension. But the point is, now Jason doesn't come to Clubhouse anymore because he thinks negatively of it because he got suspended, right? And these doctors are going into these vax rooms to try and bring sunlight, into and bring information and expertise into a conversation that desperately needs some input, and gets people are hitting the block and the ban button, and then they're getting suspended, and then they don't come back in the app. And that is the real sadness, because the app needs as many intelligent people as possible. We need smart people in Clubhouse, in these rooms, to help these conversations. That is the secret sauce of this app, I must say. The people on this, yes, 1 second, just very importantly, yourself included, Aslak, the people on this stage, each have their own expertises of all different types, and I could go down the list of everyone on the stage and celebrate each of our own unique areas of expertise that make this such a fantastic experience. And you do that into every room you go into, and we're very fortunate to have a very disproportionate number of the smart people in Clubhouse that join us in Tech News Around the World every day. But the point is if the intelligent people start leaving, the app becomes a Greyhound bus station instead of a, intelligentsia gathering. It turns into lowest common denominator. It turns into YouTube commenters, and smart people don't want to be around that, and then they're gone, and then your smart people don't want to be around that shit. It's no longer a TED Talk conference. It's a Greyhound bus station. Who wants to hang around in a Greyhound bus station all day? Not smart people. They want to hang around.
Go a piss.
Right.
I agree, Tyler. I agree with all that you said, totally, and that's why I'm here. I mean, that's why I come to this room and a few others. But I'm just wondering, what is the alternative to have a discussion? Because the doctors obviously are doing a public good,
right?
They're doing that something. It's great, and it should be done. But I'm just wondering, I mean, if we leave these rooms alone, is that better?
I hear you.
Because
it isn't. Because...
I mean, shouldn't there be some kind of interaction with these group, or should they just be left alone to their own kind of devices and shadows or whatever?
Right. Eli?
Well, what they are doing is yelling fire in a crowded theater. And this is not just free speech whenever they are plainly spreading factually false information, whether it's about the virus or about treatments or vaccines. And so this rises to a different level. And in turn, the app has responsibility for this, just the same way that Facebook and Twitter, will put a banner on something that this does not sound like good information. Here is good COVID-19 information. There needs to be something in this app that's equivalent to that. And obviously with voice, it works a little bit different. They really should have staff members going into these rooms and making those announcements at the very least.
So I absolutely agree. And I'm wondering if they can increase their kind of human identification, because when you were saying earlier that they put pictures of doctors and put the Chinese flag, that's straight up slander. And I think if people weren't anonymous, I don't think they'd be so quick to do that, because they could be held liable. And similar, the same way with Facebook, if Clubhouse was under the same kind of fire where, hey, for this slander, now you're going to be held liable legally, I wonder if that would put a fire under their butt.
I think
I was very serious. I've been saying it for over a month now, but it's really true when it's the scientists and the doctors are losing out to memes and things like that. And I believe it was the Reddit article, and I praise that because quite literally it's almost the way you have to get into what's it I forgot what the American phrase is, but you play in the mud with pigs or whatever it is. But it's really one of those conversations where I get really downtrodden with it, because you actually have to create a persona of that. Oh, you talk either very simply or in the manner that the anti-vaxxers are speaking, because the reality is if you start using just the way that generally, let's say, smart in quotes people talk, it's not going to get heard in these type of conversations.
Damolaire, the thing is, it has the opposite effect. Tyler, we were talking earlier about how pitches need to be, less analytical, less critical. The problem is you get in these rooms and you have someone get up and they use large technical words. I'm talking about people that are not medical professionals. And it becomes a word soup. But someone who doesn't know that's a word soup and that sentence didn't even make sense, that person gets validity from no one saying anything. So there's people there's a gentleman who I'm a big fan of. His name is Dr. Copeland. He's only been here maybe 2 weeks, but he has a good way of laying people down. We had this one gentleman come in, and it was a very sincere conversation, and he gave us 7 words in a row that had nothing to do with anything. It just sounded very smart. And, he set him down and he said, look, what you said actually didn't make any sense. You just said a lot of words that sounded smart, but here's what it is. And you could tell that the room was starting to understand. It's just that analytical data side of the pitch, right? Joe and Harry are going for a bike ride. They're about to die. Let's find out the end. But when you throw in the data, the people that are really seeking answers and not trying to learn the story are now listening into the words. And I think that's the danger. And I'll shut up.
They are pretty sad rooms too, because I've sat in a couple. I try and avoid them and see less when they show up in my hallway. But I've actually heard where somebody goes, "Well, I'm a lawyer and I know how this works," and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is an anti-vaxxing room," and a lawyer, lawyers are stating that they're experts, and then you have people follow them going, "Well, if the lawyer said that, I think it's right." So, but we can't stop free speech. It is concerning. But I thought that when we asked to see less rooms, maybe that would impact more people doing that. That would impact these rooms declining. I don't know.
So here's the technical measure. Whenever a room like this is identified, just kind of take moderation powers away from the people who set it up and give it just to staff, and let people come in who can speak actual information rather than disinformation.
Or when another strategy is to share this. Ellen, I have to give credit because her and I actually enjoy the rooms as a form of comedy. So we hang out there and DM.
You practice your acting
too. and Professor Asif caught me acting in one of the rooms, and the idea is to state, that Cheryl was there too. I got a whole lot of
Somebody
DMs.
DM me.
We were all
Yeah,
there. Yeah, we
I
were
know.
all like,
What's
"What's
wrong
going
with
on with Tyler?"
Yes, but what I was trying to do, what I really had a difficulty expressing it, is that I took the vaccine and I died, and I'm still dead, but my body has too many toxins and heavy metals to carry over into the afterlife.
Trolling Tyler.
And
That's hilarious.
and
Wait,
so
that room actually happened. Oh my lord!
if
I
you
wish
can
I was there.
if you can bring that kind of angle to the conversation, and kind of steer it deeply into the what's that big valley in
Bizarro
America,
world.
the Grand Canyon. Take the
Or
conversation
absurd,
into
yeah.
the endless Grand Canyon of stupidity. Then maybe the people can reassess. Just drive home and exemplify, magnify the ridiculousness of the conversation with those kinds of comments, and it helps add a little extra perspective.
But I think they empathize with
there's
you. I can feel that they sympathize you for your kind of like unfortunate experience.
This just in: COVID vaccine proves afterlife.
Yeah.
One of the things though I have to say is I understand the free speech issue because again, as we talked about yesterday, but just in general, we've been talking about the work from the Atlantic and the Intercept showed that we can't just say, hey, whatever is the dogma is the way things are, because we're learning that even the physicians and the healthcare professionals didn't have all the information, and a lot of it was hidden from them. But I have to say that the other side of things is, and I think Aslak was mentioning, there needs to be a forum. But what really worries me is when people come in and they say, hey, I know a nurse, because that's when it gets really bad. Like, I know a nurse or I know a doctor. And then they start talking about things like ivermectin, which they, by the way, know nothing about. And I've actually used with patients, and it's not as simple as everybody makes it sound. And they start talking about all of these different things. And remember, everybody is scared. And when people are scared, the issue is not choice A versus B. The issue now has been choice doing something versus not doing something. And what's these rooms have ended up, and I have to say this because this is something that my co-founder here, who's a black male, brought up. He's like, man, they are really targeting people of color. They are heavily targeting people that have a sense of who've been treated poorly by the healthcare system, who the healthcare system has led them astray. And we're seeing this right now. And the worst part is that it's affecting certain populations way more. People like Steve Kirsch. I hate even saying that guy's name because he's ruining, he and his entire family have been vaccinated. Yet he sits in rooms and talks about all of these people that have died from the vaccine, which, by the way, there's no data for. And talks about alternative therapies, which, by the way, there's no data for. If he, and these are the things, all of these people have been vaccinated themselves, but yet they're going into these rooms and leading certain people who are looking for answers and who are, frankly, crazy scared. And when you're scared,
Let's
the
just start
problem
a club.
isn't that you're going to make one side versus the other. When you're scared, it becomes, do I do something versus do nothing? And I don't know if you guys know this, but
Fear
behavioral
mongering.
economics shows, and we know from tons of behavioral science data that people are really bad at predicting long-term outcomes. And while if it's hey, I'm going to, and very bad at statistics in general. And so when people say hey, if I do nothing, I'll be careful. I'll wash my hands. I'll wear my mask. But again, there's going to be three types of people in a short amount of time, with Delta especially and other variants that are down the pipeline. There's going to be people that get COVID without a vaccine, and there are people that get COVID with a vaccine. And I'd rather be in the with vaccine sort
Yeah,
of.
Dr.
Yeah,
Dish.
I.
So
Oh,
I
go
was just
on.
gonna real
Ask.
quick. I'm just gonna say real quick. So this is why WHO is starting a totally new track. I don't know how big it's gonna be, but there's infodemics kind of board that they're building, and a lot of universities are starting to get into this space. But yeah, I think the behavior science part is gonna be key to cracking this. It's really tricky.
Yeah, I hear what you said, Chris, and Danish as well. I've been noticing that there's this intellectual will-o-wisp where it's like you tell ghost stories and you use that to back up some absurd claim with like a level of word like word to where it's yes, it's all a bit too scary in my opinion, which is why like there's a lot, especially when I go to the like in the 20s rooms, there's a lot of let's not even talk about COVID at all because we don't know the facts, we don't know anything, no one's getting the vaccine, and all of that type of stuff is like happening a lot. Like and it's and like I do a lot of stuff with health just in the Black community in general, and just talking about that level of health when it comes down to pharmaceuticals and understanding just genetics and all of that stuff, it's like that is a different frontier in terms of like even trusting the medical institutions, like, and that's in England where healthcare is free and you know there's a lot of information that the NHS lacks support, etc., etc. So when it comes down to even talking about COVID, then it's like this is too new to even have a real conversation about.
Well, a couple of things. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Tuskegee experiment. For those of you who have families that have been in the U.S. for decades, or if not multiple generations, in particular for my community, we still believe and know about the Tuskegee incident or the experiment with syphilis that was done for 4 decades, from the 30s to the 70s. So to expect a level of trust automatic is very difficult when you never saw any cases or pure investigations that was shared. And for those of us who have family that originated from Mississippi and Alabama, where 1,000 people that the government knew were infected and let go for 40 years, you can read it, the studies are out there. That over a year ago, I said, and I wrote in a couple places that that would be something that would be a roadblock for a number of people. You guys may not hear it, but it is something that's resounding in the community because the argument has always been for us, if you will do that to us, and now we know, what else will you do? I'm not trying to create any concern. I'm just giving you the mindset, and then the rest of this plays into it, and it's very concerning. That's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, like if you can't
specifically,
hold someone's hand down the road and actually give them the facts when it comes to that particular perspective, right? Because there's even a lot of talk of even like what's the term for these people? The missionaries that go to Africa, and there was even a story about someone giving kids AIDS and like these like just weird stories happening in Africa and stuff like that. And if you can't hold someone's hand down the road of actual facts, and this has to be a one-to-one conversation from my perspective anyways. I've always had one-to-one conversations with people about this, and then once I get them to the stage of understanding and then looking at data, and it takes about maybe a half an hour to an hour, which is obviously you can't do that with everybody. So if you can't do that, then it's never really going to work long term. Like you can't have this one grand stage of people where you're talking about the facts on all of COVID or this particular health area, and then people will just be like, oh, okay, I get it. Like it generally doesn't happen like that.
It's all about trust. That's it. Thank you.
We got to run.
and
We got to move on.
specifically,
Yeah, go ahead. Last word, Eli.
Yeah.
with respect to the Tuskegee experiment, there have been PSAs of the descendants of the victims of that experiment, saying that, that was horrible, but this pandemic is real and the vaccine is the solution for it. And unfortunately, people are hearing more of the disinformation than that actual information. And the larger thing is that, people and especially governments need to understand that this is why integrity matters.
Exactly.
I agree with that. So the next is that Axie Infinity co-founder says gaming is the key to crypto adoption, which is a great point. Yeah. And I'm just tweeting all of these out in quick succession here. The next one, England on target to eliminate HIV by 2030. The number of people aged between 15 and 74 living with diagnosed HIV in England increased between 2013 and 19, but 98% of those diagnosed are on proper medications now, so looks like it could disappear. The next is from Sky News, from Lucas in the audience. Fuel supply crisis live. British Petroleum says 30% of its stations have run out of the two main grades of gas. Ministers enact downstream oil protocol so suppliers, producers, and haulers can share information. Transport Secretary says there's no shortage of fuel. But indeed there is.
We have shortage of drivers, but they're going to bring the military, the army, to come
and be drivers.
Move the lorries.
Yeah. That's, well, you got to do what you got to do. Is Jean-Francois with us on stage?
By the way, I experienced this firsthand yesterday, and I had to go to 5 petrol stations. One of them said had a tanker truck refueling and said to come back in an hour and a half. And I wisely did not listen. I came back in about 30 minutes and started getting in the line, and it was absolute pandemonium after they reopened because they didn't have any ability to manage things on the public road. So people are jamming, trying to jam into the line with people that have been waiting for, in some cases, an hour or more, right? Absolutely crazy. The thing is that it's just like the whole toilet paper thing, right? And the thing is, we all learned.
Panic buying.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not even that simple, right? If you don't make sure you've got enough for the next week, then you're really screwed because the supply chains are all the supply chains aren't ready for any disruption whatsoever, right? And the problem is that it doesn't matter if only 1% of people are truly panic buying. That the existence and see, the thing is that government is doing all the things that you don't do in terms, you don't tell people don't panic, you don't blame people for, right? There's been very little discussion of the fact that, okay, if you go to the places on the main motorways, right, only just now is it becoming apparent that the companies themselves have been wisely prioritizing, those, obviously what you don't want is the motorways full of cars where people have run out of fuel because they, can't get anything. So they've wisely prioritized the service areas, right, on the motorways. But it wasn't until yesterday that I saw the first article where this was even being mentioned out loud, which is exactly what you need to do to calm people down and let them know, right, if you actually do need fuel, right, you get it where you most need it, which is, on the service area on the motorway.
Andy, it was the night before yesterday when it came on the news. I remember because my wife said, "Oh, can you go and get my?" I didn't, but can you go fill my tank? So it was just it's the news media as well as people's behavior. So
Thank you, Tyler. Jean-Francois is not on stage. We have a room starting in 10 minutes.
13 minutes.
The news media here have always had a habit of hyperventilating about the smallest things. That's really an old thing.
Yeah. But in a related headline, the UK, I don't know if you guys discussed it, the UK announces temporary visa scheme for truck drivers because many of them left after Brexit. So 2 things we've learned from COVID and from the Brexit is you got to be careful about your supply chains, and you have to be careful about whether you have the labor in country and can replace those supply chains. And these are the effects. And so the reverse, a lot of people are sort of like laughing at the fact that the people who pushed the Brexit are now having to do this.
Oh, exactly. And the crime
here,
what we call karma? Crime is how long the wage suppression has been going on for things that are clearly the only way that you're going to get the numbers of people here to do the job is in fact to pay appropriately.
Okay,
It's also the implications of just in time, and maybe it needs to be remodeled to be able to handle some of this, in regardless of where it's located. Our
Kyle, I
topic.
just wanted to let you know that the lava that I reported nearly 9 days ago on La Palma is close to the sea, and when it hits the sea, there will be a lot of poisonous gases, and it might even set up a tsunami on the east coast. It's just been reported.
Already,
I've tweeted it to you.
Thank you. So the New York Times has the article that Evan shared that, and the headline says, "That comment someone left on Facebook, it could get you sued." And so what they're doing is reporting on what we reported on 2 weeks ago, which is Australia's top court has said that media companies can be held liable for replies to their posts, prompting some to step back from the platform. So as a media company, the Australian top court decided that you must curate if somebody says something liable in a comment, and you are the New York Times and you have a Facebook profile, you put up an article, people leave jackass stupid comments. I mean, I try to imagine that somebody would leave a stupid comment on a Facebook post, but basically in Australia, if you're a media organization and somebody leaves a stupid comment, you're responsible for all the comments because you can moderate them. You have the power to do that. Hence, you must do that. And if you leave a comment that slanders or libels somebody, you enable that to happen. You had the power to remove it, didn't you? You did, and you didn't. So you're responsible. So you're giving a voice to, you're enabling that behavior. Hence, you could get sued. That's and that headline came out. You guys remember this one 2 weeks ago? And now the New York Times is writing about it. So welcome to September, New York Times. It's nice to have you here with us in September when we covered that story back in August. The David Crace sends in this one from India today, that WhatsApp payments to get cashback feature, group chats to have new design and functions. A series of developments have been hinted at for WhatsApp that will bring changes to its groups and payments features, and this is huge for WhatsApp. And this is going to turn WhatsApp into a juggernaut like it did for WeChat in China when they added all the payments features, which then bundled with all of the other apps and the marketplace. And oh my God, it gets crazy very quickly. And WhatsApp is in a perfect position to do that. So next one is from Times of India, from Evan, that amid Chinese threats, the Quad, which is the UK, India, US, and Australia, just had a summit yesterday.
Japan, I think.
Japan, you're right. Thank you. Japan, you're right. So they had their summit over the weekend, and the Quad have announced now that they are going to deploy secure, open, transparent 5G networks, which something tells me they won't be Huawei.
And they're also going to give 100 scholarships from those countries to come to the US to do stem cells.
Cool.
Not stem cell, STEM studies for graduates.
Oh, yes, science and math, yeah. And then the New York Times, again today, is covering an article we covered 2 weeks ago that the headline says, "Every day is doomsday. New limits give Chinese gamers whiplash. China has a complex relationship with video games. New government rules for minors have made it even more so." To which I ask, New York Times, what the fuck are you doing? That headline...
What you don't understand, Tyler, is that it wasn't fit to print until now.
Why? I understand that's their metric, news that's fit to print.
Wasn't there an article about the Facebook New York Times cozying up deal, or payments going back and forth around positive news stories about Facebook? Didn't we cover an article like that?
Yes, we did, yes. Facebook's promoting their own positive stories inside Facebook, but this headline about China limiting games for minors, that's 3 weeks old, and now it's in the New York Times. Yeah. And then the last article we read, which was what? I have short-term memory loss here, was also a headline that we read 2-3 weeks ago. And then why is the New York Times covering articles today as news that happened 2-3 weeks ago that were rather widely reported?
They're
really
probably being hyper cautious about fact checking things to the point that they've made themselves irrelevant.
I guess. So the next one is from the BBC, and this is also about a month old. This is really weird. Do you remember when there was, they were calling it China's Me Too movement, and it was a lady who worked at Alibaba who was claiming that the sexual harassment? Remember this? And then the court decided, they threw it out, right?
I think they dropped the case, no?
They dropped the case.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Throw it out. Drop the case. So now the BBC's reporting on this. A court has thrown out a high-profile sexual harassment case. Can China's feminist movement survive? Yeah. Where was this article 3 weeks ago when everyone else was talking about this? What's going on with the New York Times and BBC that are writing stories that are literally 3 weeks old? This is really weird.
Yeah, it doesn't take 3 weeks to fact check.
Must be the backlogs.
Little backlog.
Yeah, well, they also need this.
I was thinking about that, but metrics states that you could print as much, or not print, post as much as you want, regardless of, metrics when it comes to clicks and all of that stuff.
So here's two. Yeah.
No, all I was going to say is I think the probably bigger issue is they probably need more journalists in the areas that you're talking about on the tech and understand it, because it's more broader than what they think too.
Right. So the next one is BBC in rural Afghanistan, meaning outside the city of Kabul. A family welcomes Taliban rule. The BBC's Jeremy Bowen travels to Helmand province a month after hardline Islamists took control, and indeed, Pashtun Afghanis do generally welcome the Taliban. That's why they were able to walk in. There was no shots fired across Afghanistan. They just walked in right to Kabul. That's where the standoff was going to happen. It didn't happen. And yeah, of course, rural Afghanistan welcomes Taliban. There was a lot of interviews done in those people's homes while they were in the country, while the Taliban was, officially taking over the countrysides with not a single shot fired. So obviously they welcome the Taliban. I saw the interviews myself of all of the people in those homes who are Pashtuns. The Taliban are Pashtuns. They're from the same tribe. They don't really have a problem with their own people being in charge of Afghanistan. They kind of prefer that to who they see as occupiers being in charge there. So this is hardly news to people who follow this topic. Anyway, the next one's from BBC News. It says, can football playing robots beat the World Cup winners by 2050? Now, that's a headline. This is a great question. The Robot Football League that is hoping to eventually beat the best human team in the world. And this is a story about little Pepper SoftBank robots that they're playing in a football game. And now you get teams of robots playing each other in soccer. And the question is, how long before they win the World Cup? How many years? 30? Maybe.
Depends on the goalkeeper.
That's where the robots might have an asymmetrical advantage there. That's a great point.
I thought you meant NFL football. I'm like, well, this isn't going to work, but
right.
Soccer makes sense.
Soccer is a little more doable, and then they'll get into American football, and then heaven forbid they ever play Australian football. That would be a little crazy. And that does it, because we have to hand it over now to what is it?
Thank you.
The AI room.
NFT legal basics with two lovely attorneys, Alexandra and Jennifer.
Awesome.
I'll go over there now. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So we'll see you all in the NFT room, and thank you for another mind meld collaboration of tech news around the world. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful Monday. Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you, Eli.